Chapter 257. Even though Li Mu was always on the edge of danger, he still managed to get through the night safely. This was all thanks to his superb acting skills that he had trained. Li Mu didn't know why the Empress always appeared in his dreams, but no matter what, he would just praise her. No matter how narrow-minded the Empress was, she wouldn't be jealous of herself. He finally understood that trouble came from careless talk. No wonder Mr. May kept reminding him to be respectful to the Empress. It seemed that she already knew everything back then. Thinking about how she acted when she saw his inner demon, it wasn't that strange anymore. Recalling the past with the woman in his dreams, Li Mu was almost certain that the Empress wouldn't do anything to him. And he didn't have to worry about being disturbed by his inner demon. He could finally relax. Li Mu had been in the Luoyang for more than 2 months and had experienced a lot. He missed Lu Hanyan and Wanwan very much. He planned to go back to the northern region after the matters at the academy were settled. He left with the White Demon King without saying goodbye. He wondered how He was doing at the Bay of Clearwater. When he arrived at the Luoyang government, he happened to see Wang Wu putting a young man who looked like a student in jail. The Empress ordered all the government offices in the Luoyang government to investigate the cases involving the students of the 3 academies. Other than the Luoyang government, the Ministry of Justice, the Supreme Court, and the Censorate also started to investigate these cases. The people of the Luoyang government who were wronged could go to these government offices themselves. Since the Empress had given the order, no government office dared to bend the law. If they were found out, the entire government office would be implicated. In the eyes of the people, the Luoyang government was fairer than any other government office in the Luoyang government. Some of the people who didn't dare to go public with their grievances gradually started to go to the Luoyang government. Zhang Chun finished dealing with a case and sighed, "What's wrong with the students nowadays? When we were studying at the academy, the teachers were very strict with us. Those who didn't behave well would be kicked out of the academy. It's only been 20 years, and the academy has become a place to hide evil." Emperor Wen had a good intention in establishing the academy. Since the establishment of the academy, it had been held in high esteem by the people for more than 100 years. Although officials from different academies had formed cliques 100 years ago, where there were people, there would be disputes. Even without the 4 academies, it was inevitable for officials to form cliques in any era. At that time, the quality of the academy's students was much higher than now. The atmosphere in the academy had changed and worsened since the time of the former emperor. More than 100 years ago, when Emperor Wen was on the throne, he contributed decades of peace to the Great Zhou. The subsequent emperors were not as wise as Emperor Wen, but they were able to enjoy the fruits of Emperor Wen's rule. As long as they followed the rules and were a ruler that protected what was achieved, they would be meritorious. However, during the reign of the previous emperor, in order to prove that he was different from the previous emperors, the previous emperor implemented many government decrees. For example, the establishment of the silver law of guilt substitution and the continuous increase of privileges for the Shao royal family. All of these caused many unstable factors to appear in the Great Zhou court. Within the imperial court, officials represented different interest groups. There were constant disputes between parties, and many people died because of this. Outside the imperial court, the 36 counties were not stable either. The demon path was causing trouble everywhere. The demon nation and the ghost realm were also eyeing the borders covetously. The situation did not improve even when the Empress succeeded the throne. The chaos in the divine capital led to chaos in the academy. No one knew when this unhealthy trend started in the 3 academies. The students who were supposed to be the pillars of the imperial court had become the scourge of the divine capital. Zhang Chun said regretfully, "Emperor Wen once said that the students of the academy should read the books of the sages and learn supernatural powers. They should save the world and the people and serve the country. Now, they have forgotten the original purpose of Emperor Wen's establishment of the academy. They have forgotten why they study. 100 Rivers Academy." Vice President Chen saw another student being taken away by the yamen and asked, "How many is this?" An instructor shook his head and said, "The 16th. It is said that the divine capital yamen, Ministry of Justice, Censorate, and Supreme Court have taken away more than 20 students from the Myriad Scrolls Academy and more than 10 from the Qingyun Academy. Another instructor sighed and said, "We didn't know about this. It's good that these students have left the academy, lest they do something worse in the future and tarnish the academy's reputation." Vice President Chen said, "It's not about the academy's reputation anymore. According to the officials at the West Desk of the Secretariat, His Majesty has decided to change the selection system of the Great Zhou Court and start the imperial examination." An instructor asked in confusion, "What's the imperial examination?" Vice President Chen said, "His Majesty wants to select different subjects. From now on, all the officials of the imperial court will not be selected from the academy. If one wants to enter the imperial court as an official, he must pass the imperial court's selection. Even the students of the academy are no exception." The reason why the academy was called the academy was because the officials of the Great Zhou dynasty all came from the academy. For more than 100 years, they had provided the academy with an endless stream of vitality and vitality. If this vitality and vitality were to be cut off, the academy would not be far from extinction. If Emperor Wen was the beginning of the academy's era, then the Empress was the end of the academy's era. At this moment, a powerful aura suddenly rose from the academy. An old man with a head full of white hair appeared in the crowd. He glanced at the crowd and snorted coldly. "I've only been in seclusion for half a year, and the academy is already in such a mess because of you. Elder Huang has come out of seclusion. Welcome, Elder Huang." When the crowd saw the old man, they all bowed. In the academy, other than the president who was in seclusion all year round, Elder Huang had the highest status. They were both vice presidents, but even Vice President Chen had to greet him as a junior. Not only was Elder Huang's cultivation high, but he had also been in Dongxian for decades. He had taught countless important officials and made great contributions to the Great Zhou. He was the soul of the Baichuan Academy. The white-haired old man snorted coldly and said, "The imperial court can punish the mistakes of the academy's students. The academy can also correct the evil practices of the academy. She's just using this as a pretext to make a fuss. She wants to monopolize the power and cultivate her trusted subordinates. She wants to firmly control the imperial court in her hands. The 4 great academies will not tolerate such a thing." During the morning court, Li Mu was surprised to find a chair in front of the officials. A white-haired old man was sitting on the chair. Those who could sit in the crepe myrtle hall were naturally not ordinary people. He learned from the discussions of the officials that this old man seemed to be a vice president of the Baichuan Academy. He was very senior and had been given the right to sit in the imperial court when the previous emperor was still on the throne. Because of those scandals, the people from the academy had not appeared in the morning court several times. Today was the first time they had appeared. The old man sat there with a straight face. Even the atmosphere in the imperial court was much more solemn. Today's morning court was mainly about the imperial court holding the imperial examination and selecting talents to replace the previous situation where the academy monopolized the imperial court. This method was undoubtedly completely abolishing the old system. When the empress proposed it, it did not arouse any discussion among the officials. Only a few officials from the censorate responded, because for most of the people standing in the imperial court, this was contrary to their interests. The officials in the imperial court were said to be from the academy, but in the final analysis, the students of the academy were the children of the Great Zhou's powerful families. They sent their children to the academy, and after a few years, they could enter the imperial court as officials. This way, the status and power of their families would be passed down from generation to generation. Once the imperial court did not directly select officials from the academy, they would lose this privilege. In the past, they only had to compete with other powerful families. If the imperial court did not limit the selection of officials by birth, they would have to compete with all the talents in the 36 counties of the Great Zhou for a limited number of official positions. In this way, unless their families could continuously produce outstanding talents, the decline of their families was a foregone conclusion. No one was willing to accept this reality. Every time the empress was isolated by the officials, Li Mu knew that it was time for him to stand up. He had already offended all the factions in the imperial court, and did not mind offending them again. He stood up and said, I believe that the talents of the Great Zhou are not limited to the 4 academies. The imperial examination will allow the imperial court to discover more talents from the common people, break the academy's monopoly on officials, and curb the academy's unhealthy practices. Who are you? How dare you talk nonsense about the academy? Before Li Mu could finish speaking, he heard a reprimanding voice. He raised his head and saw that the white-haired old man sitting on the chair at the front of the great hall stood up. Li Mu said calmly, "The reason why dozens of students from the 3 academies were imprisoned and beheaded in the past few days is obvious to all the lords in the hall. I'm just telling the truth. There's no need to talk nonsense." The old man did not mention this matter. He looked at Li Mu, took a step forward and said sternly, "The 4 academies have been established for 100 years. How many talents have been sent to the imperial court? How many contributions have they made to the stability of the Great Zhou? You want to deny the achievements of the academies, deceive His Majesty, bring chaos to the imperial court, and destroy the 100 years of foundation of the Great Zhou because of a mistake made by a student of the academies. What are your intentions?" As he took a step forward, the aura of the white-haired old man suddenly spread out. This aura did not originate from his Dongxian realm, but from the telekinesis on his body. An endless stream of telekinesis was emitted from his body. It even activated the power of the heavens and the earth, and pressed down on Li Mu. Under the impact of this aura, Li Mu took several steps back. He only managed to stop himself when he crushed a green brick under his feet. An abnormal flush appeared on his face. In the Great Hall, many people smiled. The officials of the Ministry of Personnel, especially the Assistant Minister of Personnel, were incomparably delighted. They looked at Li Mu with eyes full of schadenfreude. "How dare you?" Behind the curtain, an incomparably powerful aura suddenly exploded. Chapter 258. When the Empress was angry, her cultivation of the 7th realm was fully revealed. Even the creation realm cultivators in the crepe myrtle hall felt as if a mountain was pressing down on them, making it difficult for them to breathe. Only the few people standing at the front of the group of officials could face this pressure without changing their expressions. The white-haired old man's clothes fluttered without wind, but his expression was calm. He said, "I have dedicated my life to the academy and will not allow anyone to slander the holy land in my heart. I lost control of my emotions for a moment. Please forgive me, Your Majesty." Facing the highest authority in the Great Zhou, a 7th realm transcendent existence, he was neither servile nor overbearing. This was because he was the Vice Dean of the 100 Rivers Academy and was at the peak of the 6th realm. He was only one step away from transcendence. As long as he took that step, the 100 Rivers Academy would have a second dean. In the face of the Empress' anger, he still looked calmly at Li Mu and asked, "For more than 100 years, the 100 Rivers Academy, Qingyun Academy, and Myriad Scroll Academy have cultivated countless officials for the imperial court. The scholars of the White Deer Academy guarded the borders and shed their blood on the battlefield. The contributions of the 4 academies to the Great Zhou are immeasurable. Today, you want to overturn the foundations of the academies. Speak, what are your intentions?" In the 6 ministries and 9 temples, countless officials looked at Li Mu with a mocking gaze. The 4 academies had stood tall for 100 years. How could a nameless junior like him topple them? He thought that he could do whatever he wanted in the divine capital because of the Empress' favor. However, not everyone in the divine capital feared the Empress. Elder Huang had students all over the world. In the crepe myrtle hall, countless officials of the 4th realm and above had received his teachings. He had dedicated his life to the academy. For decades, the people of the divine capital respected and trusted him. The willpower gathered in him could even communicate with the heavens and earth, allowing him to take half a step into transcendence. In the entire Great Zhou, he was the existence most likely to reach transcendence. Cultivators of the upper realm were not bound by the secular world. Once he took that step, he could transcend the world and be on the same level as the Empress. Li Mu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked up at the white-haired old man. He said calmly, "You're asking me what my intentions are?" At this moment, He was not afraid in the face of Dongshuan's cultivators, because he had Her Majesty the Empress behind him. As long as he had a clear conscience, and a clear conscience, he had no need to fear anyone. He pointed his finger at the sky and said word by word, "Heaven and earth have no heart. It does not distinguish between black and white. This official has a heart for heaven and earth." As soon as he finished speaking, those with high cultivation levels in the main hall immediately felt an unusual energy fluctuation in the air. The minister's expression changed slightly as he muttered, "This is?" Zhou Zhong looked at Li Mu, his eyes gleaming. Zhang Chun, who was standing lazily at the back, couldn't help but straighten his body. Li Mu also noticed something strange at the first moment. This was not the first time he had experienced this feeling. Back then, when he was talking about Daoist injustice in the tea house, he had a similar feeling. This was the response of the heavenly Tao. He seemed to have understood something. He pointed at the ground with his other hand and continued, "Evil laws are tyrannical, tormenting thousands of people. This official will serve the people." Above the main hall, the power of heaven and earth vibrated even more intensely. Among the officials, there were still some who didn't know what was going on. Those with high cultivation levels had already realized what was going on, and their faces were filled with shock. Even the Empress, who was pretending to be serious behind the curtain, opened her red lips slightly in surprise. A hint of astonishment appeared on her delicate face as she muttered, "Taoist technique, a new Taoist technique." Li Mu felt the power of heaven and earth condensing around him. He spoke faster and loudly, "Emperor Wu and Emperor Wen have stabilized the territory and governed the country well. After the two saints, the divine path has been lost. This official will inherit the lost knowledge of the previous saints." At this moment, in the main hall, even those with low cultivation levels had noticed the abnormality. The power of heaven and earth was fluctuating so violently that it made them feel extremely uneasy. Everyone looked at Li Mu. Obviously, he was the source of all this. Li Mu finally looked at the Empress behind the curtain and said in a deep voice, "As an official of Great Zhou, I am fortunate to have Your Majesty's care. I am extremely grateful. I will do my best until my death. I am willing to bring peace to Great Zhou." As his last sentence fell, the power of heaven and earth in the Crepe Myrtle Palace fluctuated to the extreme. Many people were shocked and looked at Li Mu with dull eyes. Establishing a heart for heaven and earth, establishing a life for the people, inheriting the lost knowledge of the previous saints, establishing peace for the world. What kind of magnificent words were these? Any one of these 4 sentences would be recorded in history and be passed down for generations. But who could do it? Heaven and earth have no heart. It does not distinguish between black and white. Heaven and earth establish a heart for heaven and earth. Who would dare to criticize heaven and earth? Everyone suddenly looked at Li Mu. The incident in Yang County was still frightening when they thought about it. At that time, the county magistrate of Yang County was muddle-headed and tyrannical. He bullied the people and treated human life like grass. Li Mu pointed to the sky and scolded heaven and earth. Heaven and earth were influenced by him and created a peerless evil spirit. Zhou Chu's death was not long ago. Zhou Chu did evil in Chengdu. Li Mu scolded heaven again. Heaven sent down divine punishment and smashed Zhou Chu into ashes in front of the people of Chengdu. This established a heart for heaven and earth. He did it. Evil laws and tyrannical laws, torturing thousands of people. I establish a life for the people. After Li Mu entered Chengdu, within a month, he forced the imperial court to change the silver penalty law. He was praised by countless people in Chengdu. Then he asked for justice for the people. He did not hesitate to offend the officials and even the academy. This established a life for the people. He did it. P.S. The original meaning of establishing a life for the people was to choose the right direction for the people's destiny and establish the meaning of life. Here, it is understood as requesting a life. Inheriting the lost knowledge of the previous saints, Emperor Wu and Emperor Wen built a foundation for the Great Zhou for hundreds of years. The way they ruled the Great Zhou was not learned by the later emperors of Great Zhou. He said that he wanted to inherit the will of the two saints and let the great Zhou regain its glory. Establishing peace for the world. Establishing a peaceful foundation for the great Zhou for the world. At this moment, who would dare to say such bold words? These 4 shocking words shocked everyone in the hall. They even ignored the increasingly strong fluctuations of the power of heaven and earth in the hall. The white-haired old man looked at Li Mu. In addition to shock, there was also a strong sense of envy in his eyes. This was not an ordinary fluctuation of the power of heaven and earth. In it, there was the aura of Daoist techniques. If he was the one who triggered the fluctuation of the power of heaven and earth, he would be able to step into transcendence in this hall today. At this moment, Li Mu suddenly turned his head and looked at the old man. He said sternly, "Emperor Wen established the academy to cultivate talents for the great Zhou, not to cultivate sinners. The shortcomings of the academy are obvious to all. You used the power of the academy to act presumptuously in the Golden Hall and offended His Majesty. How can this world tolerate you?" As soon as he finished speaking, he took a big step forward. The chaotic power of heaven and earth in the hall suddenly became extremely orderly and oppressed the white-haired old man. He was giving him a taste of his own medicine. The old man's expression changed drastically. Even if he was at the peak of the 6th realm, he was still so weak in front of the powerful power of heaven and earth. In front of heaven and earth, no matter how high one's cultivation was, they were still ants. He opened his mouth and spat out a golden page from his mouth. The page was filled with dense qi. It quickly expanded and covered his head, trying to block the power of heaven and earth for him. However, this power of heaven and earth was unusual. It directly passed through the page and landed on his body. The old man directly spat out a mouthful of blood. The aura on his body quickly withered. The figures at the front of the hall watched helplessly as his aura fell from the peak of Dongxian to the early stage of Dongxian. He almost fell out of the 6th realm. They looked at each other and saw the deep shock in each other's eyes. Divine retribution. The vice dean of the 100 Rivers Academy, who was at the peak of Dongxian and was only half a step away from transcendence, suffered divine retribution in the hall, and his cultivation almost fell by a large realm. This divine retribution made him lose at least 30 years of cultivation. At his age, his cultivation level fell. He probably would never have the chance to break through again in this lifetime. Everyone looked at Li Mu with shock. The heavens had helped him time and time again. Was he really the chosen one? The hall was silent. Only the white-haired old man's injured gasps could be heard. The officials looked at Li Mu with eyes full of disbelief. They could not believe that a small remarkable power cultivator like him could seriously injure the Dongxian. But what was even more unbelievable was that he could say such shocking words as, establish a heart for heaven and earth, establish a life for the people, inherit the lost arts for the past saints, and establish peace for all ages. It was not an exaggeration to say that these 4 sentences could cause a reaction from heaven and earth. And to be able to say these 4 sentences, what kind of breadth of mind did he have? The white-haired old man sat on the ground, paralyzed. He felt the magic power in his body drain and his cultivation level fall. A blank expression appeared on his old face. At this moment, he deeply realized that he would never have the chance to transcend in this lifetime. The transcendent realm, that was his lifelong pursuit, the dream that he pursued his entire life was shattered. Under this extreme despair, an incomparably violent emotion suddenly emerged in his heart. This violent emotion turned into killing intent and quickly filled his mind. His eyes turned blood red, and his body emitted an extremely dangerous aura. The minister's expression changed drastically, and he shouted, "Not good, he has turned into a demon." In the hall, an extremely horrifying voice suddenly sounded. Li Mu's hair stood on end. He felt his body freeze, and even his thoughts stopped working. The next moment, a withered hand appeared in front of him. Li Mu's gaze met a pair of blood-red eyes. The white-haired old man's hand reached out to Li Mu's neck, but it stopped in midair. And in front of Li Mu, there was a figure. A woman wearing an imperial robe and an imperial crown stood in front of Li Mu and raised her hand. The white-haired old man's body froze in midair. The aura in his body began to fall rapidly from the early Dongxian stage. Creation, remarkable power, spirit concentration, soul refinement. After a moment, there were no more magic power fluctuations in his body. The Empress raised her head and said majestically, "The Golden Hall injured my beloved minister and turned into a demon. Seeing that you have done well in the past, I will only cripple your cultivation and spare your life." Chapter 259. The crepe myrtle palace was so quiet that the courtiers could hear their own breathing and heartbeats. Everything happened too quickly. Even though they had experienced countless major events in their lives, none of them were as shocking as the scene just now. Vice Principal Huang was rude in front of the palace and used her power to oppress others. With her cultivation at the peak of the 6th realm, she attacked a minor 4th realm official. Although it was a bit of bullying, she bullied a favored official in front of Her Majesty. She was also disrespecting Her Majesty. However, he had the right to do so. In his life, he had nurtured hundreds of important courtiers for the imperial court, from the county magistrate and deputy to the governor of a county, the minister of the 6 ministries, the 3 provinces, the 6 ministries, the 9 temples, and the 24 divisions. How many of them were his students? Even in the palace today, many courtiers had to respectfully address him as "Sir" in front of him. Not to mention a minor official or an imperial censor, even if Vice Principal Huang pointed at the minister's nose and scolded him, the minister would still have to lower his head and listen. However, Li Mu did not do so. When Vice Principal Huang was pressuring him and asking him what his intentions were, he said such shocking words of truth. Establishing a heart for the heavens and earth, establishing life for the people, inheriting the lost knowledge of the past saints, establishing peace for all ages. These 4 words of truth directly resonated with the heavens and earth. Li Mu borrowed the power of the heavens and earth and used his own methods to make Vice Principal Huang fall from the peak of Dongxian to the early stage of Dongxian, completely crushing his hopes of attaining transcendence. The fall of his realm and the destruction of his hopes caused Vice Principal Huang to directly enter the demonic path in the palace and lose his mind, forcing His Majesty to personally cripple his cultivation. The harm that a peak 6th realm expert who had entered the demonic path could cause was immeasurable. His Majesty only crippled his cultivation and spared his life, already taking into account his past contributions. However, what shocked everyone was Li Mu. There was no such thing as a chosen one in this world. It was his actions and his words of truth that were recognized by the heavens and earth because in the eyes of the heavenly axiom, he was more righteous than Vice Principal Huang. If someone else had said these 4 sentences, even more people would have scoffed at them. However, everyone could see that Li Mu was really using his actions to fulfill these 4 mantras. It was no wonder that he could resonate with heaven and earth. This was a person without selfishness. He was neither friend nor foe. He cared for the people, was not afraid of heaven and earth. He was loyal to his country and had justice in his heart. Even heaven and earth were moved by such a person. With his cultivation crippled, Vice School Head Huang was overwhelmed by rage and fainted. The Empress slowly walked to the top and said, "Send Vice Headmaster Huang back to the academy." 2 guards walked in from outside and silently carried Vice Principal Huang out. The officials were all silent. Even the officials from the 100 Rivers Academy and Vice Principal Huang's former students all maintained their silence. Vice Principal Huang used righteousness to oppress Li Mu, but Li Mu used righteousness to suppress her. His righteousness was the righteousness of the academy. Li Mu's righteousness was the righteousness of heaven and earth. The righteousness of the academy was not worth mentioning in front of the righteousness of heaven and earth. The Empress looked down at the officials and said, "As for the imperial examination, the Central Secretary and the West Platform are to draft the rules within a month. After that, the imperial court will follow the imperial examination system in selecting officials. Does anyone have any objections?" The officials continued to be silent. No one spoke. At this point, who could have any objections? Who dared to have any objections? In the past, the academy had the righteousness. In the past 100 years, they had sent countless talents to the academy. Even Her Majesty could not be stubborn. But now, Li Mu's righteousness had overwhelmed the righteousness of the academy. Vice Principal Huang had been possessed by the devil in the Golden Hall and her cultivation had been destroyed. The righteousness of the academy had been seized by the empress. As her subjects, they could not resist the empress. Now that they could not even reason with her, what else could they say? The central secretary was silent for a moment. Then he stood up and bowed, saying, "Yes, Your Majesty." The empress glanced at the officials and said majestically, "Dismissed." The empress left from the back of the palace. After the officials bowed, they began to leave the Ziwei Palace in an orderly manner. Their eyes lingered on Li Mu for a long time. Their eyes were very complicated. All along, in the eyes of the officials in the imperial court, he was a disruptor and a destroyer of the established rules of the imperial court. Except for Her Majesty, he was disliked by everyone. He was an alien in the eyes of the officials. Until today, some people realized that Li Mu was not breaking the rules. He was re-establishing the rules. Perhaps in his eyes, they were the aliens. There was no doubt that the structure of the imperial court would be changed after today. If His Majesty had Li Mu, he would have righteousness. If Li Mu had His Majesty, he would have a backer. Her Majesty had dignity and force. Li Mu convinced people with reason. But his reason was not reason, but the law of the heavens. After the officials left, Li Mu was still standing in the palace and did not leave. He took a step forward, but his body swayed and he almost fell. His face turned pale in an instant. The white-haired old man's cultivation was at the peak of Dongxian. He was half a step away from transcendence. Li Mu had just entered the realm of divine power. He was almost 3 realms away from him. 1% of his power was not something Li Mu could withstand. The armor on his body could withstand the attacks of the cultivators of Dongxian. If not for the armor, he would have been seriously injured under the pressure of Li Mu's aura. The realm that had just risen would have fallen again. The white-haired old man's move was so vicious. Therefore, when he saw that the empress had destroyed his cultivation, Li Mu did not have the slightest sympathy. Instead, he was somewhat gratified. It was not in vain that he had done so much for the empress. There were still some healing pills in the ring. Li Mu was about to take out one when he suddenly heard a familiar voice. "Open your mouth." Li Mu subconsciously opened his mouth. A white light shot into his mouth. A pill melted in his mouth. The pure medicinal power dissolved in an instant and quickly healed his injuries. Soon, Li Mu's injuries were all healed. He felt that his body had returned to its peak state. Li Mu cupped his hands and bowed to the figure in the palace. "Thank you, Your Majesty." The empress stood in front of him and asked, "Why don't you raise your head?" Li Mu lowered his head and said, "I dare not face you directly. A dream was just a dream." Li Mu wasn't ready to face the empress in real life. "Dare not?" The empress snorted. "You criticize me behind my back every day. Is there anything you dare not do?" Li Mu sighed. She said this to make everything clear. Even if Li Mu wanted to escape, it was impossible. He raised his head and looked at the familiar face in front of him. "I am guilty. I should not have criticized Your Majesty behind your back?" the empress asked. "When did you know that it was me?" Li Mu said honestly, "A few days ago, I saw a portrait of Your Majesty when you were young." After saying this, he realized that something was wrong. He immediately said, "Your Majesty is still young. What I mean is, I accidentally saw a portrait of Your Majesty a few years ago." The empress asked, "So the loyalty you expressed to me in the dream was also fake?" Li Mu cupped his hands and said, "The dream was fake, but the words were true. Heaven and earth can bear witness to my feelings for Your Majesty." The empress glanced at him and said, "I can let bygones be bygones. If you dare criticize me again in the future, I will not let you off easily." She had already looked into it. Thinking of the whip in the dream, Li Mu sighed inwardly. "I will remember. If there is nothing else, Your Majesty, I will take my leave." The empress thought for a moment and said, "Have lunch before you leave." Li Mu enjoyed his lunch quietly in the palace. Outside the palace, huge waves were surging. The vice president of the 100 Rivers Academy, Elder Huang, who was at the peak of the sixth realm, was possessed by a demon in the Golden Palace. After the court session, the news of his cultivation being abolished by the Empress quickly swept through the divine capital. Elder Huang was respected in the academy. He had trained countless officials for the Great Zhou. He had a high reputation among the people. Even if the reputation of the 100 Rivers Academy was damaged, it did not affect his position in the hearts of the people. Apart from being the vice president of the 100 Rivers Academy, he was also a powerhouse who was one step away from transcendence. What happened to make him possess a demon in the Golden Palace and have his cultivation abolished by the Empress? What happened in the court session was interpreted by countless people from the mansions of the officials. In the past few decades, the atmosphere of the academy had been corrupted. It had even become a place of corruption. Li Mu agreed with the Empress to open the imperial examinations and appoint officials from all over the world. However, he was suppressed by Elder Huang. Breaking the academy's monopoly on the officials was beneficial to changing the atmosphere of the academy. It also gave other talents in the 36 counties a chance to stand out. This move was beneficial to the people. It placed the people, the nobles, and the aristocratic families in the divine capital on the same level. From then on, even the common people would have the opportunity to enter the court and become an official. However, this move obviously violated the academy's interests. Even the respected Elder Huang did not hesitate to attack Li Mu in front of the Empress and the officials for the sake of the academy's interests. However, he did not expect that Li Mu's enthusiasm would even move the heavens. Establishing a heart for heaven and earth, establishing life for the people, inheriting the lost knowledge of the past saints, and establishing peace for all ages. When Li Mu said these 4 sentences in the Great Hall, they shocked countless people. The academy's nurture talents for the court was pale and powerless compared to these 4 sentences. Those who could say these 4 sentences and put them into practice personally were worthy of being praised by all ages. Chapter 260. After lunch, Li Mu thought about a problem as he walked out of the palace. The 4 sentences of Henku appeared for the first time in this world and resonated with heaven and earth. Logically speaking, it should be a newly created Taoist technique. However, Li Mu himself did not benefit much from it. The creation of a new Taoist technique was accompanied by a chance to be imbued with the power of heaven and earth. This opportunity could allow the top cultivators of Dongxian to step into transcendence. He had brought many new Taoist techniques to this world. According to this pattern, he should have enjoyed the imbuement of heaven and earth many times. His cultivation should have reached the 8th or 9th realm instead of the 4th realm. Could it be that in order to obtain the power of heaven and earth, one had to comprehend and create Taoist techniques themselves? Heaven's will was unpredictable. Until now, the cultivation world had not figured out what the heaven's way was. It seemed unrealistic to plagiarize a few sentences and become a super powerhouse in the world. Li Mu sighed regretfully. He decided not to bite off more than he could chew. It was better to be down to earth and cultivate with peace of mind first. Although there were no inner demons now, it did not mean that there would not be in the future. Cultivators feared inner demons as much as heaven's wrath. Inner demons not only affected one's cultivation and personality, but also consumed one's lifespan. It was said that the former emperor had an inner demon because of something. In the end, his cultivation regressed and his lifespan ran out. Even though the late emperor was unable to ascend to the transcendence realm, he was still a see-through realm cultivator. Not only the late emperor, but even someone as strong as the white-haired old man would lose his mind after his cultivation regressed. He would lose his mind in an instant and lose his mind. Even see-through realm cultivators could not defeat their inner demons, so Li Mu had to be more careful. If it were not for Her Majesty, Li Mu would have had to use the golden armor talisman. The vice principal's cultivation was destroyed by Her Majesty. He did not know if the Baichuan Academy would revolt. Their principal had also transcended. If the 4 academies joined forces, Her Majesty might not be able to bear the pressure. Baichuan Academy. Vice Principal Huang had not woken up after being sent back to the academy. Vice Principal Chen looked at him with sorrow. He sighed and said, "Why did you do this?" One of the instructors said angrily, Even if Her Majesty wants to attack the academy, she shouldn't be so cruel to Elder Huang. Isn't she afraid of disappointing the students of the academy and the people of the world? Vice President Qin shook his head and said, Elder Huang's realm has fallen, and there is no hope for him to transcend in this life. He has already turned into a demon. If there are no powerhouses in the upper three realms to stop him, a cultivator from Dongxian who has turned into a demon can slaughter a city and destroy a country. One of the instructors sighed and said, His Majesty has already decreed that from now on, the imperial court has to select officials through the imperial examination. What should the academy do? How the imperial court selects the best. If the students from the academy are not as good as others, it means that they are not talented enough. Even if they lose, there is nothing to complain about. A burst of laughter sounded in everyone's ears. A thin middle-aged man walked in from outside. When they saw the middle-aged man, everyone bowed. Even Vice Principal Chen bowed slightly to him. Then, he looked at the white-haired old man lying on the bed and said, Principal, Elder Huang, the middle-aged man said, I know all about it. He waved his sleeve, and a white light enveloped the white-haired old man's body. The old man frowned, but he still did not open his eyes. The middle-aged man shook his head and sighed, saying, He doesn't want to wake up again. Vice President Qin sighed, but he was not surprised. How powerful were the cultivators of Dongxian? One person could fight against 10,000 soldiers. They could observe the sky and know the number of stars. With a raise of their hand, they could move mountains and fill the sea. In the eyes of mortals, they were like gods. It was probably unacceptable for anyone to turn from a powerful god to an ordinary person. It was reasonable that Elder Huang did not want to wake up and face this cruel reality. The middle-aged man said, I once advised him. Although the academy can help him condense his psyche power to cultivate, it is also a cage for him. He is trapped in this cage, enslaved by obsession, and finally destroyed by obsession. Vice President Qin knew very well that the existence of the academy played a vital role in Elder Huang's cultivation. It was precisely because of this that he did not want to see the academy decline. Because if the academy declined, his cultivation would also be blocked. This was his selfishness. Unfortunately, the selfish Elder Huang met the selfless Li Mu. One was for his own cultivation, and the other was for the people and the foundation of the Great Zhou. This time, even the heavenly path stood on Li Mu's side. The middle-aged man walked out of the room and said, I have been negligent in managing the academy for the past few years. Vice President Qin immediately said, It's all my fault. I only cared about their cultivation and schoolwork, but I neglected their morals. That's why the academy has developed such a bad trend. The middle-aged man said, The academy is a place to educate and cultivate talents for the Great Zhou. This is also the original intention of Emperor Wen when he established the academy. It's better not to participate in the affairs of the state. Vice President Qin nodded and said, Yes. Everyone in Luoyang knew about Vice President Huang of the Baichuan Academy in a few days. As the spiritual symbol of the Baichuan Academy, Elder Huang had been in the academy all his life. He had cultivated many capable officials for the imperial court. His status in the hearts of the people was naturally very high. Many students of the Baichuan Academy also regarded him as their faith. But now, their faith had collapsed. Not only that, but the rules that had been maintained between the academy and the imperial court for more than 100 years had also completely changed. In the past 100 years, the nobles, officials, and prominent families of the Great Zhou had sent their children to the academy. They would study in the academy for 3 years, and then they would all be accepted by the imperial court. The outstanding students would immediately be granted official positions and become officials of the Great Zhou. If there were no vacancies in the imperial court, they would have to wait. But no matter what, the students from the academy would sooner or later become officials of the Great Zhou. It had been so for the past 100 years. However, from now on, this rule that had been rooted in everyone's hearts was about to change. In the future, the officials of the imperial court would no longer be produced by the academy. Any citizen of the Great Zhou, as long as they had a clean background, regardless of whether they were rich or poor, noble or not, whether they were officials, nobles, or disciples of famous families, as long as they passed the imperial court's examination, they would have the opportunity to become an official. From now on, the lower-class citizens of the Great Zhou would also have the opportunity to rise to the upper class. Although this would affect the interests of the nobles, what was rare was that the officials who represented the interests of the various parties in the imperial court all remained silent about this matter. This was because the four great academies had also remained silent. The four great academies existed for two reasons. First, it was to provide talents for the imperial court. Second, it was to restrain the imperial power. This was a decision made by a wise ruler, Emperor Wen of the Great Zhou. During Emperor Wen's time, the Great Zhou was peaceful, and the people lived a prosperous and peaceful life. It was the most prosperous time since the founding of the Great Zhou. Emperor Wen was worried that the future emperor of the Great Zhou would be muddle-headed and ruin the foundation that his ancestors had laid. So, he specially gave the four great academies a special privilege. If the emperor was muddle-headed and brought disaster to the Great Zhou, the four great academies could set things right and return the Great Zhou to the right track. In the past 100 years, the four great academies had only used this power once. During the time of the previous emperor wantonly changed the laws and appointed people based on their own connections. This caused the Great Zhou's people to resent him and the imperial court to be in a foul mood. The previous emperor did not listen to advice, and many loyal officials and their families were killed. The Great Zhou was filled with internal troubles, and external enemies were also restless. At that time, the four great academies appeared and completely suppressed the imperial court. They completely took away the power of the previous emperor. At that time, the ancestral temple did not give birth to the emperor's qi. The previous emperor's cultivation was only at the Dongxian realm, which was piled up by the resources of the royal family. In front of the four great academies, the Shao royal family had no room to resist. The previous emperor was greatly affected by this incident, and his cultivation did not improve. Instead, it regressed and he died in a few years. The Zhou family seized that opportunity and pushed the empress to the highest position. This time, the empress wanted to shake the foundations of the four great academies. The four great academies did not resist, not only because the empress was different from the previous emperor and had reached the transcendent realm. Perhaps, even the four great academies approved of the empress's actions. Chapter 261. In the small courtyard, Li Mu formed a seal with his hands and silently recited a spell. His body suddenly disappeared from the spot. Very quickly, his body appeared again. Li Mu formed another seal to cast a spell. This time, his upper body was still there, but his lower body had mysteriously disappeared. After a few more attempts, he either just entered the state of invisibility and revealed himself very quickly, or he could only hide a part of his body. His mana had already been depleted by more than half. Li Mu's face was a little pale as he sat down to rest. Xiaobai ran over and massaged his back and shoulders as she said, "Savior, don't be anxious. Take your time, you will eventually learn." After advancing to the level of Abhijna, Li Mu could learn more Abhijna. When cultivators fight, they fight with Abhijna spells. After completely stabilizing his level, he began to learn level 4 Abhijna. The Daoist book that Su He gave him recorded many Abhijna that he could learn at this stage. For example, walking on water and sitting on fire, swallowing knives and spitting flames, concealment and so on. After some consideration, Li Mu decided to learn the most useful ones first, starting with invisibility. When he was still in the lower realm, he could also learn some basic spells. Calling the wind and summoning the rain in a small area was a piece of cake for him. When he first learned them, it took him a day to half an hour to learn them. But the spells of the middle realm were completely different from those of the lower realm. It gave Li Mu a confused feeling as if he had just entered university and had just stepped into advanced mathematics from elementary mathematics. For these Abhijna spells, the hand seals were more complicated. Even if it was combined with incantations and hand seals, it still required personal understanding to be successfully cast. Otherwise, there would be situations like Li Mu, where he could only hide half of his body. In comparison, Daoist spells were easier. If a new Daoist spell resonated with heaven and earth for the first time, the creator of the Daoist spell would be recognized by heaven and earth, and even the hand seals could be omitted. For example, Li Mu only needed a thought to disperse Xiao Yu's Daoist spell. In the future, if Henku's 4 lines could also conjure Daoist spells, the caster would not be able to cast them in front of Li Mu. The prerequisite was that someone could cast them. Most Dao techniques could be used directly by using mantras and hand seals, but there were some that could not. Xiao Yu's Taoist spell used her resentment to communicate with the heavens and earth. Li Mu didn't have her experience, so he couldn't use it. Otherwise, when he was telling stories in the Yunyan Pavilion, he would have resonated with the heavens and earth and created a phenomenon that shook the entire North region. Henku's 4 sentences were the same. It was the highest pursuit of scholars or court officials. Only when there was someone who was worthy of the heavens and earth, who was trusted by the people, who had truly set their heart for the heavens and earth, and who had set their lives for the people, could they communicate with the heavens and earth through these 4 sentences. Other than that time in the palace, Li Mu could no longer resonate with heaven and earth through these 4 sentences. Perhaps in the eyes of the heavenly Tao, he had yet to achieve this. Li Mu practiced the invisibility spell for a while, but he still couldn't get the hang of it. Sensing a familiar aura outside, he quickly walked over, opened the door and asked, "Sister May, why are you here? Does His Majesty have another order?" Mr. May glanced at him and asked, "Can I come if His Majesty didn't give me any orders?" Li Mu said, "Of course not. Sister May, you can come whenever you want. You're always welcome here." Mr. May walked into the yard and looked up. He said, "The array here is set up well. Even a cultivator of the 5th realm would have to spend some effort to break it. Did you set it up?" Li Mu smiled embarrassedly and didn't deny it. Li Mu had the right to be proud of his array skills. No, it was Thousand Illusions Venerable who had the right to be proud. Among the 10 demonic sects, there was a sect called the Forbidden Sect, which was famous for its array skills. Thousand Illusions Venerable had once used his strength to snatch the Forbidden Sect's array book. In addition, Li Mu was very talented in array skills and had Thousand Illusions Venerable's memory. If he had enough materials, it wouldn't be difficult for him to set up a big array that could trap Dongxian. Mr. May looked up to observe the array. Li Mu said, "Xiao Bai and I are preparing to cook. Sister May, do you want to stay and eat with us?" Mr. May shook his head and said, "There is no chance today. His Majesty wants you to go to the palace." Li Mu was confused. "It's my day off today. Why does His Majesty want to see me?" Mr. May said, "His Majesty ordered the Hall of Secretariat to formulate the policies for the imperial examination within a month. In the past, the imperial court chose officials from the academy. More than 100 years ago, it was recommended by each family. The Hall of Secretariat didn't have a precedent and didn't know where to start. Since you proposed the imperial examination, His Majesty wants you to guide the officials of the Hall of Secretariat and formulate the policies for the imperial examination." Li Mu felt a little regretful. When he was in the yamen, he was very busy and had to patrol every day. When he finally had his day off, he finally had time to accompany Xiao Bai. He had made an appointment with her to buy food and cook, but he was suddenly summoned by the Empress. Xiao Bai's bright eyes flashed with a trace of disappointment. She quickly smiled and said, "Go ahead, I'll wait for you at home." Li Mu noticed her disappointment. He thought for a moment and asked Mr. May, "Can I take her with me?" Hearing this, Mr. May was stunned. He looked at Li Mu and saw that he didn't seem to be joking. He thought for a moment and nodded. "Yes, but when we enter the palace, you have to stay by our side. You can't run around." Xiao Bai happily held Li Mu's arm and said, "I won't leave you, Savior." With Xiao Bai following them, the atmosphere became much livelier. When they entered the palace, she held Li Mu's arm and looked around. She grew up in the mountains and was very surprised by the magnificent buildings that could be seen everywhere in the palace. The Hall of Secretariat was located in the palace, west of the Ziwei Palace. It was also known as the West Stage. Among the 3 provinces, the Hall of Secretariat was the decision-making body. It was in charge of important government affairs. All the policies of the Great Zhou were formulated by the Hall of Secretariat. It could be said that it was the think tank of the Great Zhou. To some extent, the Hall of Secretariat decided the path that the Great Zhou would take in the future. This was also the reason why the Empress gave the Hall of Secretariat the task of formulating the imperial examination policy. When Li Mu was brought to the gate of the Hall of Secretariat by Mr. Mei, an official was already waiting there. He first bowed to Mr. Mei and said, "Greetings, Mr. Mei." Mr. Mei said lightly, "I've brought Lord Li here. The Hall of Secretariat must treat him well. Do not neglect or offend him. If he delays important matters of the imperial examination, the Hall of Secretariat will be responsible." The official smiled bitterly and said, we wouldn't dare. He had seen the consequences of offending Li Mu in the Great Hall. No one wanted to be punished by the heavens. Moreover, they were asking for help this time, so they wouldn't offend him. The Hall of Secretariat was a confidential place. Even the officials of the other departments couldn't easily enter. Mr. Mei went to Xiaobai and said, "I'll take you to the front garden. The flowers there are very beautiful." Li Mu patted Xiaobai's head and said, "Let Sister Mei take you to play first. When I'm done here, I'll go find you." Xiaobai nodded obediently. Mr. Mei took her away. The official from the Hall of Secretariat smiled at Li Mu and extended his hand. "Lord Li, please." Li Mu stepped into the Hall of Secretariat and asked, "How should I address you?" The official said, "I'm Lu. I'm an official of the Hall of Secretariat." Li Mu couldn't help but look at this person a few more times. Looking at his appearance, he was in his 30s, about the same age as Zhang Chun. Li Mu originally thought that he would be the head of the Hall of Secretariat, but he didn't expect him to be an official of the Hall of Secretariat. An official of the Hall of Secretariat was only a 5th-rank official, the same as Zhang Chun. However, his position in the court was completely different. A 5th-rank Shindu token was dispensable in the court. If he didn't come to court, no one would notice. However, an official of the Hall of Secretariat was the backbone of the Hall of Secretariat. Most of the political affairs of the Great Zhou were discussed and decided by the 6 officials of the Hall of Secretariat. As long as there were no accidents, anyone who could become an official of the Hall of Secretariat would be a giant in the court in the future. The two of them walked into the Hall of Secretariat. When they passed through the long corridor on the right, a young man walked out from the side of the yamen. The man had a short beard and was handsome. He looked to be in his 30s. The wrinkles at the corners of his eyes showed that he wasn't as young as he looked. However, the vicissitudes of life brought by these wrinkles didn't reduce his charm. On the contrary, combined with his angular face, it added to his temperament. As a man, and a handsome one at that, Li Mu had to admit at first glance that this middle-aged man had a great temperament. Although they were both middle-aged, Zhang Chun was much more greasy. There wasn't a trace of grease on his body. When he walked on the street, he could probably make some young girls and young women go crazy. This temperament of a mature man was something that Li Mu didn't have at the moment. Lu Yi stopped and saluted the man. He said, "Assistant Minister Cui." The man looked at Li Mu beside him and asked, "Who is he?" As a confidential yamen, the Hall of Secretariat was in charge of confidential affairs and important government affairs. Therefore, there were 4 special prohibitions: no leaking, no auditing, no breaking, no forgetting, and no outsiders were allowed to enter. Lu Yi explained, "This is Li Mu, Lord Li. We invited him to work together on the strategy for the imperial examinations." Li Mu. The man looked at Li Mu and a strange look appeared in his eyes. He didn't say anything else and turned to walk into the yamen. The two of them continued to walk forward. Lu Yi explained, "This is Assistant Minister Cui. He just returned to Shindu yesterday, so he doesn't know Lord Li." "Assistant Minister Cui?" Li Mu stopped and asked, "Which Assistant Minister Cui?" Lu Yi said, "There is only one Assistant Minister Cui in the Hall of Secretariat. He is the left Assistant Minister Cui Ming, Princess Yunyang's son-in-law." Li Mu was silent for a moment before he smiled and said, "Assistant Minister Cui, I've heard a lot about you." Chapter 262. Lu Yi was surprised. Official Li knows about Assistant Minister Cui? Before Li Mu came to the capital, Assistant Minister Cui had left and only returned yesterday. There was no reason for him to know about Assistant Minister Cui. Li Mu smiled. Of course I know. I come from the North County. Assistant Minister Cui was a county magistrate there for a period of time. Even now, there are still legends about him in the North County. No wonder. Lu Yi seemed to have thought of something. Assistant Minister Cui is handsome and heroic. Everywhere he goes, countless girls go crazy for him. I didn't expect that after being in the capital for so long, there are still people in the North County who remember him. Li Mu had only heard of Cui Ming before. Now that he saw him, he knew how he could use women to rise up the ranks. This person's appearance and temperament were excellent. If he debuted in the future, he would easily attract a group of female fans who would call him hubby behind his back. Since ancient times, people's pursuit of appearance had never changed. No matter if it was a young girl or a young woman, it was hard to resist this temperament. Madame Chu, the daughter of the Jiujiang County Magistrate, and Princess Yunyang had all fallen into his hands. Li Mu wanted to use Lu Yi to find out more about Cui Ming. He revealed a gossipy expression and said, I heard that Assistant Minister Cui had several marriages. Lu Yi nodded. I also heard that Assistant Minister Cui was originally the son-in-law of the Jiujiang County Magistrate. Later, Assistant Minister Cui found out that the Jiujiang County Magistrate colluded with the demon sect. Assistant Minister Cui exposed his father-in-law to the imperial court. The Jiujiang County Magistrate's family was executed by the late emperor. Only Assistant Minister Cui was transferred to the capital because of his merit in exposing them. He shook his head. The Jiujiang County Magistrate's daughter was his first wife. Assistant Minister Cui was ruthless. Li Mu asked, how did Princess Yunyang and Assistant Minister Cui get together? Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, at that time, Assistant Minister Cui was the head of the Secretariat and worked in the Imperial Secretariat. The Imperial Secretariat was in the palace, and Princess Yunyang often went to the palace. The two might have met by chance. Later, Princess Yunyang's husband died suddenly. After half a year, Assistant Minister Cui became the new husband. In the following 10 years, he was promoted from the head of the Secretariat to the head of the Imperial Secretariat. Li Mu still wanted to ask for more details, but Lu Yi had already taken him into a yamen and introduced him to the people in the room. Everyone, Lord Li is here. 4 of the 5 officials in the yamen stood up and saluted Li Mu with cupped fists. Lu Yi introduced them to Li Mu. These are the other 5 heads of the Imperial Secretariat. From left, they are Lord Zhou Xiong, Lord Wang Shi, Lord Zhang Huili, Lord Song Liangyu, Lord Xiao Ziyu. After Lu introduced them one by one, Li Mu learned that these 5 people were the other heads of the Imperial Secretariat. In the past, the important matters of the Imperial Secretariat were dealt with by them. These 6 people were involved in most of the decisions of the country. Although these decisions might be rejected by the Imperial Secretariat, they were undoubtedly the people who understood the country's affairs the most. In this aspect, even the Empress could not compare. The 6 of them were all middle-aged. Lu Yi, who was around 30 years old, looked to be the youngest. Li Mu's gaze swept past Zhou Xiong. Out of the 5 people, 4 of them had greeted him earlier. Only this person was still sitting on the chair, not moving at all. Lu Yi coughed softly and said, Lord Zhou, we are here on the Empress's orders. We hope that Lord Zhou can put aside past grievances and discuss the imperial examination together. Li Mu asked, does he have a grudge against me? Lu Yi walked to Li Mu's side and whispered in his ear, Lord Zhou Xiong is Minister Zhou's uncle. Li Mu finally understood. No wonder he felt that Zhou Xiong was familiar when they met for the first time. This person was somewhat similar to Minister Zhou. He did not know if he was the 2nd or 3rd brother of the 4 brothers of the Zhou family. Lu Yi handed a sorted file to Li Mu and said, this is the preliminary draft after our discussion. Lord Li, please take a look. If you feel that there is something wrong with this draft, we will discuss it later. Li Mu took the draft. After glancing at it, he found many unreasonable points. The ancient dynasty of another world had experienced more than 1,000 years of imperial examinations. Its advantages and disadvantages, as well as the evaluation and analysis of the imperial examination system, had all appeared as important test points in the history examination. These were all compulsory content in high school history. Li Mu did not need to search his memory to say it out loud. There is a problem here. It seems that you still do not understand the meaning of the imperial examination. The imperial examination refers to the selection of officials for different subjects. Every subject tests a different ability. How can they be the same? The Ministry of Revenue focuses on mathematics. The Ministry of Justice focuses on criminal law. The Ministry of Rights focuses on the rights of Zhou. Change. The officials of the divine capital do not need to have a high cultivation. Are you worried that the demons and ghosts will attack the divine capital? The officials of the bordering counties and prefectures must have a cultivation above creation realm. There was no precedent for the imperial examination system. They discussed it for several days, but their minds were still in a mess. Li Mu only said a few words, but they were able to see through the fog. Soon they had a clear idea. As the rumors said, the imperial examination system was most likely proposed by Li Mu to the empress. They were the officials of the secretariat. Every day, they dealt with many important matters of the imperial court. They were extremely sensitive to certain matters. If the imperial examination could replace the academy to select officials as Li Mu said, although it would weaken the influence of the nobles and aristocrats on the imperial court, it would definitely be a good thing for the continuation of the great Zhou dynasty. If a large number of officials came from the common people, the cliques formed by the academy would be greatly weakened. The common people at the bottom would then have the opportunity to advance. It would be beneficial for the accumulation of psyche. There was no doubt that this method of selecting talents for the imperial court would find many talents outside the academy. It was undoubtedly a better system than the one currently in place. At this moment, they realized that Li Mu's words of bringing peace to the world were not just for show. Although they could not finish talking about the imperial examination in a short time, if Li Mu was willing to point them in the right direction and build a framework, they would be able to complete the rest on their own. However, Li Mu did not do so. He planned to go back early. First of all, he wanted to come to the secretariat a few more times. More importantly, he had promised Xiaobai to go shopping with her. Li Mu stood up and said, "That's all for today. I have important matters to attend to. Let's talk about it another day." Lu Yi stood up and said, "Thank you, Lord Li." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "It's all for the imperial court." Lu Yi said, "I'll see Lord Li out." The two walked out of the yamen. The secretariat official named Wang Shi said, "This Lord Li is not as detestable as they say." Zhang Huili said, "He's a straight man." Song Liangyu said, "He's also a perfected person." Xiao Ziyu said, "A straight man and a perfected person are easily detested by most people. That's because he's not the same as most people." He looked at Zhou Xiong and said, "To meet such a straight man, your nephew's death was not unjust." Zhou Xiong snorted and left in a huff. Li Mu walked out of the secretariat. Not long after, Mr. Mei came from afar with Xiaobai. He said in surprise, "It's over so soon?" Li Mu said, "The imperial examination system is complicated. We'll have to do it a few more times." Mr. Mei said, "It's still early. You can stay a little longer." "It's not early." Li Mu shook his head and said, "Any later and the food in the market won't be fresh." Li Mu took Xiaobai's hand and said, "Let's go." Xiaobai held Li Mu's hand and said, "Benefactor, there are many beautiful flowers in the garden." Li Mu smiled and said, "If you like, we can go back and plant flowers in the garden at home." A figure walked out of the secretariat and said, "It's been a few months. Mr. Mei, you're still as handsome as ever." Mr. Mei looked back at Cui Ming and said lightly, "Mr. Cui, you're back." Cui Ming smiled gently and said, "I just came back to Luoyang yesterday. I'm about to meet His Majesty to report on my work. Mr. Mei, please pass the message." Mr. Mei shook his head and said, "His Majesty is very busy. It's not important to report on your work. Mr. Cui, it won't be too late to report on your work tomorrow morning." As soon as she finished speaking, footsteps came from behind her. Li Mu came back with Xiaobai and said, "Sister Mei, I have something to discuss with His Majesty." Mr. Mei nodded and said, "Follow me." Seeing the three of them leave, Cui Ming went back to the secretariat and found a manager. He asked, "What happened in the court when I wasn't in Luoyang?" The manager said, "Many things happened in Luoyang in the past 2 months. Since Li Mu came to Luoyang, a group of officials were beaten up and the silver method was abolished. Then, Zhou Chu of the Zhou family was struck to death by lightning. A few students of the academy were beheaded. Elder Huang of the Baichuan Academy was possessed by His Majesty in the Golden Palace and his cultivation was abolished. Cui Ming had just come back to Luoyang last night, so he didn't know about these things. The last time he heard of Li Mu's name, it was the evil spirit that was born in North County. A constable named Li Mu pointed at the sky and cursed, causing a vision of heaven and earth. Later, the Daoist injustice that was promoted by the court to all counties was also related to Li Mu. Cui Ming didn't expect so many things to happen in Luoyang while he was away. He couldn't believe it and said uncertainly, "Did Li Mu do all this?" The manager of the secretariat nodded and said, "He's now His Majesty's favorite official." Favorite official? Cui Ming heard this and his face darkened. Chapter 263. On the way to Shangyang Palace with Mr. Mei to meet the Empress, Li Mu asked Mr. Mei, "Does Sister Mei have a grudge with Assistant Minister Cui?" Mr. Mei looked back at him and asked, "Why do you say that?" Li Mu said, "From the way you talk to him, you don't seem to like him very much." Mr. Mei reminded him, "Cui Ming and Princess Yunyang are not good people. They are important figures in the old party. You should stay away from them." Hearing this, Li Mu's impression of Mr. Mei improved. Sure enough, as the commander of the Mei Guards and one of the Empress's most trusted subordinates, her taste was not comparable to that of those vulgar women. In front of Shangyang Palace, Mr. Mei turned back and said, "Her Majesty should be in the back hall. Li Mu and I will wait in the hall. Xiaobai, stay here. Don't run around." Xiaobai let go of Li Mu's hand and nodded obediently. Suddenly, a voice came from the hall. "Come in." With the Empress's permission, Mr. Mei said, "Then let's go in." The three of them walked to the main hall, and the Empress walked out from the back of the hall. Little White used a curious gaze to size up this legendary woman in front of her. Lord Mei was beside her, and he reminded her softly, "Don't look directly at Her Majesty." Xiaobai immediately lowered her head. The Empress did not mind Xiaobai's unintentional offense. She asked Li Mu directly, "How's the discussion with the officials of the Secretariat about the imperial examination?" Li Mu said, "There should be a result in a few days." The Empress said, "We must make a perfect policy within a month. I have ordered the 36 counties to recommend local talents as soon as possible. 3 months later, they will participate in the imperial examination with the students of the academy." 3 months was a bit rushed from the formulation of the policy to the implementation. But if they were well prepared, it was not impossible. On the contrary, it could show His Majesty's decisiveness and determination to change the old system. The core of the imperial examination was just a few tests to select talents. Removing some cumbersome etiquette and simplifying the process, 3 months was more than enough. Li Mu cupped his fists and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." The Empress then asked, "What business do you have with me?" Li Mu asked, "I would like to ask Your Majesty, is there any shortcut to the art of invisibility?" The difficulty of mastering the 3 middle realms was beyond Li Mu's imagination. Some cultivators who didn't belong to a sect could only slowly comprehend it on their own. The Empress was also an important cultivation resource for Li Mu. Not only was she a powerhouse in the upper realm, but she was also very talented. She should be able to answer all of Li Mu's questions about cultivation. The Empress glanced at Li Mu and asked, "You came to see me just to ask this?" Li Mu nodded. After a moment of silence, the Empress slowly said, "The key to the art of invisibility lies in forgetting oneself. If you can comprehend the state of forgetting oneself, you will soon be able to learn this magical power." Forgetting oneself? When Li Mu was learning this technique, He had tried to use the mind-clearing formula to calm himself down. At this time, his mind was calm, his thoughts were clear, and he was not disturbed by external things. He used it to write talismans and break through barriers, which was successful in every endeavor. But when learning invisibility, the clear heart secret art had no effect. After the guidance of the Empress, Li Mu realized that he was going in the wrong direction from the beginning. If the key to the art of invisibility was forgetting oneself, then the calmer he was, the clearer his mind was, the more difficult it would be to master this technique. Li Mu closed his eyes, removed all distracting thoughts, and tried to empty himself. He changed his hand gestures instinctively. After a moment, his figure disappeared out of thin air. After a few breaths, Li Mu's body appeared again. But this time, it was him who cancelled the invisibility. He had been learning this technique for several days without making any progress, but the Empress's words enlightened him. It could be seen how important it was to have a good teacher during cultivation. Li Mu bowed and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty, for your guidance." The Empress asked, "Is there anything else?" Li Mu said, "No." Walking out of Xiangyang Palace, Mr. Mei looked at Li Mu and asked, "You came to see Her Majesty just to ask about this?" Li Mu said, "This question has been bothering me for a long time." Mr. Mei said, "You can ask me about cultivation. You are really bold to disturb Her Majesty for this kind of thing." Li Mu was determined to be the Empress's personal assistant. Naturally, he would use every opportunity to get close to the Empress and cultivate their relationship. As long as they met enough times, they would be familiar with each other. Moreover, the Empress's cultivation level was 2 whole levels higher than Lord Mei's. Between these 2 levels, there was even a gap of a whole major level. If one had to choose between the 2 of them to ask about cultivation, one would know who to choose even without using his brain. Mr. Mei sensed something and asked, "Brat, do you think my cultivation is far below Her Majesty's and I can't teach you?" Li Mu waved his hand and said, No, absolutely not." Mr. Mei said, "Do you dare to swear?" Li Mu looked up and quickly took Xiaobai's hand. He said, "It's getting late. Let's go back. The food in the market won't be fresh if we stay any longer." After running a few steps with Xiaobai, Li Mu turned around and said, "Sister Mei, if you have time, come to my house for dinner." In Chengdu, there were not many people Li Mu could trust. Mr. Mei was one of them. She escorted Li Mu from the North County to Chengdu and took care of him. Li Mu had nothing to repay her, so he could only treat her to a simple meal to express his sincerity. This meant that he truly approved of her. Although Li Mu had promised Lu Hanyan that he wouldn't fool around after coming to Chengdu, Lu Hanyan wasn't on the list of flowers that she was wary of. It was still early when they left the palace. Li Mu and Xiaobai went to the East Market first and bought some flower seeds. Li Mu had 2 gardens at home, but he hadn't taken care of them. Since Xiaobai liked them, he might as well plant flowers in them and wait for Lu Hanyan and Wanwan to come back. It could also add some decorations to the house. "Li Mu, you're shopping too?" A familiar voice came from behind. Li Mu turned around and saw Zhang Chun at the entrance of a flower shop not far behind him. There were 2 people beside him. They were both women. One was a woman in her 30s, and the other was a thin woman. Li Mu was familiar with both of them. He could meet familiar faces while shopping with Xiaobai. Li Mu held Xiaobai's hand and walked forward. He smiled and said, "Lord Zhang, Madame Zhang, Missy, what a coincidence." The woman smiled and said, "So it's Constable Li. Is this Madame Li? She's so beautiful." Zhang Chun's heart skipped a beat. He glared at the woman and said, "She's not Madame Li. Don't talk nonsense." Seeing Li Mu, the owner of the flower shop walked out and took a bag of flower seeds from the side. He said, "So you're Constable Li's friends. You should have said so earlier. I'll give you this bag of flower seeds." Zhang Chun was holding the precious flower seeds that he couldn't bear to buy just now. He was the Chengdu magistrate, and in his jurisdiction, he had to rely on his subordinate constable to take advantage of him. He felt a little jealous. Xiaobai, Madame Zhang, and her daughter went into the shop to pick out the flower seeds. Li Mu and Zhang Chun waited outside. Li Mu thought of Cui Ming and asked Zhang Chun, "Old Zhang, if someone, in order to climb up the social ladder, killed his wife and threw her body in the wilderness. He also framed his wife's family and caused more than 10 people in her family to die in vain. What should we do? Such an animal is worse than meat. Of course we should. Zhang Chun said angrily. Before he finished, he suddenly woke up and looked at Li Mu. He asked cautiously, "Who are you talking about?" Li Mu said, "Cui Ming." "Who's Cui Ming?" Zhang Chun looked confused and asked, "Could it be the Cui family of the 9 families?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "No." "That's good." Zhang Chun puffed out his chest and said, "As long as it's not the Cui family of the 9 families, I don't care if he's a disciple of the academy or an official in the court. Whoever dares to do such an animal will be punished by me." "Your Excellency is indeed noble." Li Mu saluted him and said, "This is the left assistant minister of the secretariat, Cui Ming, the prince consort of Princess Yunyang." More than 20 years ago, Zhang Chun was stunned. He picked his ear and said to Madame Zhang in the shop, "Madam, are you done? It's getting late. We should go home." Li Mu was stunned and said, "Old Zhang Yu, I knew it." Zhang Chun pointed at Li Mu and said angrily, "As long as you open your mouth, nothing good will come out of it." That's the left assistant minister of the secretariat, a 4th-rank official, and a relative of the emperor. He won't even have to pay with his life for killing someone. Aren't you overestimating me? No matter if it's the Luoyang Yamen, the Ministry of Justice, the Censorate, or the Supreme Court, none of them are qualified to try such a case. Li Mu said helplessly, "I know the Luoyang Yamen can't do anything to him. That's why I want you to help me." Zhang Chun shook his head quickly and said, I really can't." This time, Li Mu did not try to persuade Zhang Chun again. Cui Ming's case was different from all the previous cases. In the past, they only interrogated the sons of officials and the students of the academy. They did not have official positions. Once they had official positions, the Luoyang Yamen was no longer qualified to try them. Officials above 4th rank, as well as relatives of the emperor, even the Ministry of Justice and other yamens were not qualified to try them. These people were the ones who truly enjoyed privileges in Great Zhou. Li Mu did not say anything else. Zhang Chun's expression kept changing as if he was conflicted. He glanced at his wife and daughter, who were bargaining with the shopkeeper in the flower shop. In the end, he sighed and his expression returned to normal. At this moment, there was a commotion on the street. "It's Lord Cui, the emperor's son-in-law is here. Let me see, let me see." "If I can marry a man like the emperor's son-in-law, no, as long as I can have a night with him, I'll die without regrets. Look at yourself. How dare you say something like that? Don't insult our emperor's son-in-law." Li Mu turned his head and looked at the source of the commotion. He saw a figure he had seen in the secretariat. Cui Ming did not take a carriage or a sedan. He walked on the street with countless people crowding around him. The younger women on the street behaved well. However, the women in their 20s and 30s looked at him with fanaticism. It reminded Li Mu of the fanatical fans in his previous life. Li Mu could sometimes cause such a commotion when he walked on the street. However, most of the people crowding around him were men. That was when he was escorting criminals to the Luoyang Yamen or the Ministry of Justice. Zhang Chun's expression was one of disdain. He said bitterly, "A bunch of foolish women who judge a book by its cover." "I didn't expect the women of Luoyang to be so indecent," Li Mu said. "That's Cui Ming." Zhang Chun spat and said, "I knew it. I could tell at a glance that he's a beast." Madame Zhang walked out of the flower shop. Her face was still red. She mumbled, "Who was that person who just walked past?" Zhang Chun said, "Madam, you saw it too, right?" "That person?" Madame Zhang's face was still red. She said, "I wonder which woman got lucky enough to marry him." Zhang Chun was stunned when he saw his wife's red face. Madame Zhang looked in the direction of Cui Ming until his figure disappeared. She looked at Zhang Chun and sighed. "You should trim your beard. You're already so old, yet you're still so unkempt." The 3 women continued to shop in the next shop. Zhang Chun's beard trembled. He said angrily, "Why? That Cui Ming has a beard too." Li Mu patted his shoulder and said, But he looks better with a beard than you. Zhang Chun's face darkened. He said sternly, that's too much. With their relationship, it was indeed too much to say that. Li Mu immediately said, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I wasn't talking about you. Zhang Chun's face was solemn. Scum like him who killed his wife and framed his wife's family. He's worse than a beast. It won't be enough even if he dies 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 times. As the magistrate of Luoyang, how can I let scum like him roam free in Luoyang? I swear I'm not human if I don't bring him to justice. Chapter 264. Zhang Chun's chest heaved. It was obvious that he was furious. After knowing him for so long, Li Mu had never seen him so angry. Thinking about it from another perspective, if his wife started to dislike him after being infatuated with another man, Li Mu's mentality would also collapse. Of course, such a situation was impossible. Li Mu did not have Cui Ming's mature charm. In terms of appearance, he was still better. Youth was an asset. His face was full of collagen. Most of the women who liked Cui Ming were older women. Most of them preferred young puppies. However, Zhang Chun was different. He was also a middle-aged man, but he was not as good-looking as Cui Ming. His temperament was also worlds apart. Due to his cautious behavior, he was often a little wretched. The only thing missing was the word, greasy, written on his face. Whether it was his appearance or temperament, he was crushed by Cui Ming in all aspects. Li Mu sighed and said, Lord Zhang, let it go. He's a relative of the emperor and a fourth-rank official. If you're just jealous, there's no need to offend him. This time, Li Mu's tone was sincere. He could do whatever he wanted in Fairy's capital because the empress stood firmly behind him. Unlike him, Zhang Chun had a family to feed. If he could avoid getting involved in this matter, he would try his best to avoid it. Zhang Chun patted his chest and said righteously, I'm not jealous. I hate evil. Her Majesty trusts me, and that's why she promoted me to the magistrate of Fairy's capital. As the parent of the people of Fairy's capital, I'm absolutely irreconcilable with evil. Li Mu looked at him in a new light when he saw how righteous he was. Zhang Chun looked at Madame Zhang's back and said in a low voice, If I don't chop off this animal's head in front of these foolish women in Fairy's capital, my surname isn't Zhang. Li Mu looked at Zhang Chun's ferocious face and understood something. Jealousy made people crazy. Just because Mrs. Zhang took a few more glances at Cui Ming, Zhang Chun, who was timid just now, changed his mind. Beheading the man of their dreams in front of the women of the divine capital. These women would probably have nightmares for several months. The middle-aged man's jealousy was terrifying. It was not an easy task to bring down Cui Ming. He was in a high position and was a member of the royal family. He was a core member of the old party. The Shao clan would not let him fall so easily. This involved the royal family of the Shao clan, the old party, Princess Yunyang, and even the West Palace. This was the most difficult task that Li Mu had to do since he came to Luoyang. But he had to. Firstly, it was for the sake of justice. Establishing a heart for the heavens and earth, establishing life for the people, inheriting the supreme arts of the past saints, establishing peace for all ages. Li Mu was not just saying these words for fun. He had to do his best to realize these 4 sentences and turn them into a Dao technique that belonged only to him. Perhaps, this was the opportunity for him to enter the upper realm in the future. Secondly, it was for Su He. He and Su He were sworn friends. Back in Yangqiu County in the North County, Li Mu had already made up his mind to avenge her. Even if she broke out of the formation, she was only a 5th realm soul cultivator. The divine capital was no different from a tiger's den to her. It was impossible for her to take revenge on her own. She would not even have the chance to see Cui Ming before she was captured by the powerhouses of the divine capital. It would be best if Li Mu could avenge her before Su He broke out of the formation. No matter the reason, Cui Ming had to die. Li Mu's eyes flashed while Zhang Chun's expression darkened. The two looked at each other and reached a tacit understanding. At this moment, the two of them shared a common enemy. 15 minutes later, Li Mu and Zhang Chun's family parted ways. Xiao Bai chose her favorite flower. The two of them went to the market to buy some vegetables and returned home. Xiao Bai went to the kitchen to prepare while Li Mu went to his room. He opened his palm and a white light flashed. Bai appeared in his hand. When Li Mu was concentrating, this was the first sword that Li Qing had given him. In battle, it could no longer provide any help to Li Mu. Only Mrs. Chu's sword spirit was of some use to him. Before advancing to the Abhijna level, Li Mu needed Mrs. Chu's spiritual power to perform Dao techniques that he could not perform. Li Mu had advanced to the Abhijna level with the help of the Empress. Bai was no longer of any use to him. All that was left was nostalgia. After parting at Yangqiu County, there was no news of Li Qing. After Fulu School's disciples advanced to the Abhijna level, they would go out to train. No one knew where she went. After holding Bai for a while, Li Mu composed himself. With a thought, Mrs. Chu's figure floated out of the sword. She bowed and said, "Young master, what are your orders?" After coming to the Immortal's capital, Li Mu did not let Mrs. Chu out. For the past 2 months, she had been sleeping in the sword to recover her soul. Li Mu said, "I saw Cui Ming today." Upon hearing Cui Ming's name, Mrs. Chu's originally gentle face suddenly became ferocious. Ghostly qi surrounded her body and she said in a sad voice, "Where is that bastard? I want to kill him." Li Mu shook his head and said, "He is now the emperor's son-in-law. He holds an important position in the court and has a high position. His cultivation has also reached the 5th level. You can't kill him. You will only die if you go." Upon hearing this, Mrs. Chu's emotions gradually calmed down. She shook her head and said self-deprecatingly, "I couldn't kill him when he was alive, and I still can't kill him when I'm dead." Li Mu said, "Cui Ming is a heartless person. I must kill him. When the time comes, I may need your help. After Cui Ming is dead, I will return your freedom. When the time comes, you can go wherever you want." Mrs. Chu suddenly raised her head and asked, "Young master, you really want to kill Cui Ming?" Li Mu nodded. Mrs. Chu knelt on the ground and said firmly, "As long as I can kill Cui Ming, even if my soul is scattered, I am willing. My only wish is to die after him." After more than 20 years, Li Mu could still feel the hatred in Mrs. Chu's heart. It was a pity that she didn't meet Li Mu before she died. Otherwise, she would have attracted the attention of heaven and earth and become a peerless evil spirit. After telling Mrs. Chu about this, Li Mu asked her to enter Bai. Then, he put Bai away and walked out of the room. He planned to go to the kitchen to help Xiao Bai. Just as he walked into the courtyard, there was a knock on the door. Li Mu felt Mr. May's aura. He didn't expect her to really come for a free meal. He opened the door and found that Mr. May wasn't the only one. Mr. May and Shangguan Li were standing behind a woman. Li Mu saw the woman and said in surprise, "Your Majesty," the Empress said, "I came out of the palace in plain clothes. Your Majesty isn't here." Li Mu scratched his head and asked tentatively, "Then how should I address your Majesty, Miss Zhou?" Shangguan Li said angrily, "How dare you?" The Empress said, "This isn't the palace. You can call me whatever you want." Li Mu glanced at Shangguan Li. If he hadn't come to Luoyang a few years later, she wouldn't have the right to speak. In terms of protecting the Empress, she was more comprehensive than Li Mu. She was the Empress's bootlicker. Li Mu extended his hand and said, "Miss Zhou, your presence brings light to my humble abode. Please come in." He didn't know why the Empress came to his house in plain clothes, but he couldn't ask directly. He could only invite her in first. Just as the Empress sat down, there was another knock on the door. Li Mu had a puzzled look on his face. Usually, other than him and Little White as well as Lord May, who occasionally conveyed the Empress's decree, no one else would come to the house. What had happened today? Li Mu opened the door and saw Zhang Chun standing outside. Zhang Chun stood outside the Li residence with a gloomy face. He had made an appointment with Li Mu to discuss Cui Ming in the Luoyang Yamen in the afternoon. However, after returning home, his wife had mentioned Cui Ming many times. The speaker didn't mean it, but the listener took it seriously. The more Zhang Chun thought about it, the angrier he got. He felt a faint green light above his head. He didn't even have lunch at home. Instead, he went out to discuss with Li Mu. He stepped into the Li residence and said, "Have you finished cooking? Give me a bowl and chopsticks." He looked up and saw 3 figures standing in the yard. His voice stopped abruptly. 2 of them were Mr. Mei and the Empress' personal maid, Shangguan Li. The other person had her back to him. Zhang Chun couldn't help but tremble when he saw her back. He was too familiar with this back. That day in the hall, she was the one who destroyed Elder Huang, who was at the peak of Dongxian. With a finger, Zhang Chun pulled back his foot that was about to step out. He turned around and said, "I suddenly remembered that there is an emergency at home. I'll see you in the yamen." After saying that, he strode away without looking back. Zhang Chun was extremely shocked as he walked on the street. The Empress was actually in the Li residence. This further confirmed his bold guess. The Empress was the master of the Great Zhou. Who cared if he was a relative of the imperial family or an assistant minister of the Secretariat? As long as Li Mu said something to the Empress in the future, Cui Ming's head would be enough to be chopped off. He put on a righteous expression and said, "You killed your wife and framed me. You're worse than a beast. If I don't execute you according to the law, I won't be a Luoyang magistrate." After saying that, he realized that Li Mu wasn't beside him. He was the only one here. The righteous expression on his face disappeared. He sneered and said, "Damn Cui Ming. How dare you seduce my wife? Let's see if you die this time." Chapter 265. Zhang Chun seemed to have something to do. She left without entering the door. Li Mu closed the door again and returned to the courtyard. He had originally planned to start cooking with Xiao Bai. However, the Empress had suddenly arrived, and her intentions were unknown. He couldn't possibly be busy with his own matters and leave the Empress and the others here. Li Mu walked behind the Empress and stood quietly, trying to guess her intentions. Then he realized that he couldn't guess it at all. A woman's heart was like a needle at the bottom of the ocean. Li Mu could guess what Xiao Bai and Wan Wan were thinking. However, the Empress's thoughts were even harder to guess than Lu Hanyan's. This was because she had 2 personalities. One was the dignified and serious Empress, and the other was Li Mu's nightmare with unparalleled whip skills. The Empress stood in the courtyard with her back facing Li Mu. She asked, "Are you used to living in this house?" Li Mu nodded and said, "It's just a little big. It's troublesome to clean it up." The Empress turned to look at him and said, "I gave you a maid, but you didn't want her. If you don't like the size of this house, I'll change it to a smaller one for you." Li Mu hurriedly said, "No need, no need. I'll get used to it. As long as you like it." A big house with 5 entrances was Zhang Chun's lifelong goal. Who would complain that their own house was too big? Li Mu and Xiao Bai lived in such a big house. Naturally, it was a little big. However, Lu Hanyan and Wan Wan hadn't returned yet. If there was a new addition to the family in the future, the house with 5 entrances might still seem small. The Empress asked this question and didn't say anything else. Li Mu waited for her to go somewhere else. However, they didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. Li Mu asked tentatively, "Xiao Bai and I are preparing to cook. Your Majesty, Mr. Mei and Master Shangguan, do you want to have a meal here before you leave?" This was obviously the intention of sending them off. As the ruler of a nation, the Empress would not and could not possibly stay for a meal here. This did not match her identity and status. Li Mu even suspected that she didn't need to eat on a daily basis. Li Mu, who was in the transcendent realm, could already abstain from eating. Did the transcendent realm feed on the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and the essence of the sun and moon? The Empress sat down on the stone chair and said, "Okay." Li Mu was dumbfounded. Couldn't she tell that he was sending her off? If a guest suddenly came to stay for dinner, she should tactfully refuse. Wasn't this a traditional virtue of Great Zhou? Li Mu asked, "We haven't started preparing yet. The meal should take a long time. Will it delay His Majesty's handling of state affairs?" Shangguan Li said, "The imperial court has 3 provinces, 6 ministries, and 24 divisions. If His Majesty has to deal with every matter, what is the point of having them? Mr. May grabbed Li Mu's arm and said, "Let's go. I'll go help you guys in the kitchen." After being dragged into the kitchen by Mr. May, Li Mu knew that they had decided to stay for dinner. Although he and Xiaobai bought enough food for 2 people to eat for 2 days, and the 5 of them finished it in 1 meal, he didn't lose out. After all, the Empress was probably the only family in the Immortal's capital that could benefit from her. Mr. May took care of him like a big sister, so it was only right that he treat him to a meal. The Empress was Li Mu's financial backer, so he had to serve her well. As for Shangguan Li, Li Mu had automatically filtered her out. Li Mu and Xiaobai made 4 dishes and 1 soup for the 5 of them. It wasn't a sumptuous meal, mainly because they didn't buy much. After the dishes were served, the Empress sat at the table while Mr. May and Shangguan Li stood behind her. The Empress said, "This isn't the palace. Sit down." Li Mu was hesitant at first, but after hearing what the Empress said, he felt relieved and sat down with Xiaobai. Mr. May and Shangguan Li sat on her left and right, acting more cautiously. They only picked up their chopsticks when the Empress picked up. They would only eat the dishes in front of them. From Li Mu's point of view, being the Empress was meaningless. After sitting on the throne, his family and friends would all change. At least for Li Mu, he would rather not have power than give up these things. Usually, it was just him and Little White at home. When it came to dinner, there were no rules. It was normal for them to chat and laugh. However, with the Empress present, Lord Mei and Gongsun Li were like guardians, sitting at the side obediently. The atmosphere was a bit tense, and the meal was tasteless. The Empress suddenly asked, "Why do you have a fox demon with you?" Hearing this, Xiaobai was shocked. She immediately put down her chopsticks and moved closer to Li Mu. Li Mu explained, "Before she transformed, I saved her once. After that, I met her again. In order to repay my kindness, she has been by my side ever since." The Empress asked, "Repay my kindness? She's from the Heavenly Fox clan?" Li Mu nodded. The biggest difference between the Heavenly Fox clan and the ordinary Fox clan was that they would repay kindness and revenge and would not be tainted by karma. Hundreds and thousands of years ago, their ancestors had become heavenly foxes and had passed down their bloodline until now. In fact, there was not much bloodline power left. The Empress stretched out her hand, and a sparkling and translucent crystal bottle appeared in her palm. The crystal bottle was half filled with a bright red liquid. Li Mu didn't know what the liquid was, but Xiaobai seemed to sense something. She grabbed Li Mu's hand tightly and looked a little scared. The Empress said, "There are a few drops of black fox essence blood here. They are useless to me, but they should be useful to her. Give them to her." Li Mu's eyes lit up. The Fox clan's strength was determined by the number of tails. 1 to 3 tails could only be called demon foxes. 4 to 6 tails could be called spirit foxes. Those who could be called black fox had at least 7 tails, which was equivalent to the 7th realm of human beings. If Xiaobai could absorb these drops of black fox essence blood, there was a great chance that she could grow another tail and evolve from a demon fox to a spirit fox. Li Mu accepted the crystal bottle for Xiaobai and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." The Empress said, "I ate the food she cooked. Just take it as an exchange." This exchange couldn't be more worth it. The black fox essence blood was enough to make all the fox demons fight over it. For more than 100 years, no black fox was born in the Great Zhou. Perhaps only the nation of demons had such an existence. As expected of the Empress. She even had such a precious thing and was generous. If she was willing, Li Mu didn't mind quitting his position and becoming her personal chef. After dinner, Li Mu sent the 3 of them out and said with a smile, "Take care. You're welcome to come again." Back in the courtyard, Li Mu instructed Xiaobai, "Go back to your room first and adjust your magic power to its peak state. I'll guard you tonight. After refining these drops of black fox essence blood, you should be able to evolve." Xiaobai had been in human form for some time and had an endless supply of spiritual jades. Originally, she still had a long way to go before she could evolve to 4 tails. However, these few drops of black fox essence blood were enough for her to evolve from a demon fox to a spirit fox overnight. Xiaobai still needed a few more hours to adjust herself to her peak state. Taking advantage of this time, Li Mu returned to the government office first. As soon as he stepped into the office, Zhang Chun walked out from the back of the office. He walked up to him and asked softly, "Has Her Majesty left?" Li Mu replied, "She left after dinner." Zhang Chun sighed. "You're really good in the kitchen. You're virtuous and virtuous. You're a motherly model of the world." Li Mu looked puzzled. "What are you talking about?" Zhang Chun shook his head. Nothing. Let's talk about Cui Ming. Why don't you ask Her Majesty to issue an edict to behead that beast Cui Ming? It'll save us a lot of trouble." Li Mu glanced at him. "Who do you think I am? Do you think Her Majesty will issue an edict just because I asked her to?" Since Great Zhou had developed until now, the power of the emperor was actually very limited. The empress couldn't do whatever she wanted. When officials of the 4th rank or above in Great Zhou or members of the imperial family committed crimes, only the imperial ancestral temple could judge them. The empress couldn't interfere. Moreover, this matter involved Princess Yunyang, who represented the imperial family of the Shao clan. Since the empress ascended the throne, she hadn't gotten close to the Zhou clan or the imperial family of the Shao clan. If she interfered in this matter, it would be easy to mislead the outside world. They would think that she had made up her mind to suppress the old party of the Shao clan. This would make the court even more chaotic. Li Mu's duty was to solve the empress's problems, not to add to her troubles. He couldn't pin all his hopes on Cui Ming's matter on the empress. It was best to go through the proper channels. Zhang Chun spread his hands and said, "Then there's no other way." Since ancient times, members of the imperial family, relatives of the imperial family, and officials of the 4th rank and above who committed crimes had to be handed over to the imperial ancestral temple. The imperial ancestral temple is the old party. How can they judge him? Li Mu asked, "What did you plan to do before?" Zhang Chun said, "Since only the imperial ancestral temple has the right to punish Cui Ming, then I'll enter the imperial ancestral temple. Her Majesty intends to reform the court. If she can break the old party's control over the imperial ancestral temple, then she will have the right to punish Cui Ming. Unfortunately, when I went back to the capital to investigate, I found out that since ancient times, the officials of the imperial ancestral temple have been members of the imperial family of the Shao clan. It's difficult for outsiders to infiltrate." He looked at Li Mu and said leisurely, "Unless you have someone in the secretariat who can take the appointment and dismissal authority of the imperial ancestral temple's officials back to the court." Li Mu heard this and smiled. "Isn't this a coincidence?" Chapter 266. Li Mu had no one in the secretariat, but as the advisor of the secretariat, he had a lot of say in the reform of the Great Zhou's official selection system. If the empress was involved in Cui Ming's case, things would become even more complicated. If he could infiltrate the imperial clan temple, everything would become legitimate. The formulation of this imperial examination policy was the best opportunity. He would go to the secretariat tomorrow. Today, he would help Xiao Bai to guard her and let her complete the transformation from a demon fox to a spirit fox. Li residence. The young girl sat cross-legged on the bed. Li Mu sat cross-legged behind her. His 2 hands were pressed against her back, continuously transferring the mana in his body into her body. The cork of the crystal bottle placed in front of the bed suddenly opened. The bright red blood flew out of the bottle and entered Xiao Bai's body. These few drops of black fox blood essence contained a large amount of spiritual power. After fusing with Xiao Bai's blood, it made the blood in her body boil and a large amount of white gas emitted from her body. Li Mu used all his mana to help her refine the few drops of black fox blood essence. The young girl's delicate little face was frowning. She bit her lips lightly as if she was enduring great torture. In her body, the black fox blood essence was constantly resisting. However, it soon seemed to have sensed something and gradually became gentle. It began to completely merge with her blood. Li Mu also noticed the piece of the black fox blood. These few drops of blood should have sensed the aura of its race. The few drops of blood essence no longer resisted, and the refining process became much easier. Xiao Bai could do it alone. Li Mu had just retracted his hand when he suddenly felt a few fluffy things in his arms. He looked down and found 4 white tails. When a fox demon evolved, it would grow an extra tail. If it could not maintain a complete human form, its tail would appear. Li Mu sat cross-legged behind Xiao Bai. Her tail reached into Li Mu's arms. She used to have 3 tails. Now that she had 4 tails, it meant that she had successfully advanced. The young girl turned around and looked at Li Mu, her charming eyes like silk. Benefactor, I have advanced to 4-tailed. Her beautiful face and enchanting eyes seemed to want to suck Li Mu's soul out of his body. Li Mu recited the clear heart incantation to get rid of her charm. He reached out and knocked on her forehead, saying, "Don't charm me." The young girl covered her head and said with grievance, "I didn't." Her pitiful expression made Li Mu's heart flutter again. Li Mu jumped off the bed, arched his back and fled. He said, "I'm going to cultivate in seclusion. Tonight, you sleep in your own room." Li Mu fled back to his room and lay on his bed. His heart was still thumping. The charm of a spirit fox was already so powerful. How powerful would the heavenly fox and heavenly fox be? It was no wonder that foxes could become supreme among demons when they had 9 tails. They could compete with 9th realm experts of the human race and the dragon race. This was a racial talent bestowed upon them by the heavens. They could affect the enemy's mental state greatly just by standing there and doing nothing. Tonight, Li Mu had a rare case of insomnia. He lay on the bed, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. When he finally fell asleep, Xiao Bai's figure appeared in his mind again. It was not just Xiao Bai. There was also Lu Hanyan and Wanwan. At first, everything was still under Li Mu's control. Later, for some reason, this dream slipped in a direction beyond his control. This was the aftereffect of being bewitched by Xiao Bai. Li Mu clearly knew that this was wrong, but he was still addicted to it. Lu Hanyan Wang, Xiao Bai? If not for being bewitched by Xiao Bai, Li Mu would never have dared to dream like this in the past. Suddenly, Li Mu felt like he was being spied on. He turned around and saw a familiar figure standing in the distance. Li Mu shuddered, and his consciousness immediately woke up from the dream. Lu Hanyan, Wanwan, and Xiao Bai's figures suddenly disappeared. Li Mu looked at the figure in the distance and hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, please listen to my explanation." The figure stood on the spot and gradually disappeared. In the room, Li Mu sat up abruptly on the bed. He recalled the dream just now, as well as the Empress who appeared at the end and witnessed everything. His sleepiness was completely gone. There were no words to describe his current feelings. After seeing the scene just now, his tall and mighty image in the Empress' heart had probably collapsed. He still had to attend court tomorrow. How could he still have the face to appear in front of the Empress? After a sleepless night, Li Mu wanted to ask for leave early the next morning. However, after thinking about it, he could not hide forever. Running away would not solve the problem. As long as he did not feel awkward, the Empress would be the one feeling awkward. After all, she had intruded into someone else's dream without their consent. No matter how one looked at it, she was in the wrong first. There were not many things worth discussing in today's morning court. There were only a few officials who put forward their own suggestions regarding the imperial examinations. The change in the imperial court's selection system had already been finalized. The 4 great academies had no objections, and the officials could only accept it. If there was anyone to blame, they could only blame the 4 great academies for not living up to expectations. They could only blame Elder Huang for his selfishness and insisting that Li Mu and Li Mu compete to see who was favored by the heavens. Li Mu hid in a corner of the crepe myrtle hall the entire morning. He did not say a word. He kept feeling that there was a pair of eyes looking at him from behind the curtain. Under that gaze, he seemed to return to his naked state last night. Fortunately, today's morning court ended very quickly. Li Mu could not wait to leave the crepe myrtle hall and head straight for the secretariat. He had come once yesterday. Li Mu and the 6 officials of the secretariat could not be considered friends, but at least they were familiar with each other. Today, the 7 of them continued to discuss the details of the imperial examinations. Li Mu pointed out a point and said, "The imperial examinations need absolute fairness and impartiality. The era of the academies has passed. No matter how high the official is, No matter how long the legacy of the noble family has been passed down, they cannot bypass the imperial examinations and directly recommend. Zhou Xiong retorted, the power of the 9 distinguished families has existed since the founding of the country. How can you cancel it just because you say so? Li Mu said, it's not me who wants to cancel it. It's His Majesty who wants to cancel it. Zhou Xiong snorted, don't use His Majesty to scare me. His Majesty has never said such a thing. Li Mu slammed the table and said angrily, does His Majesty want me to give advice or you to give advice? Since you like to talk so much, you can speak for me later. I'm happy to be idle, Lu Yi hurriedly persuaded. Lord Li, calm down, calm down. We can talk things over. The imperial examination system was the first of its kind. The Secretariat did not have any experience that could be used as a reference. Without Li Mu's help, it would be impossible to complete such a huge project within a month. Li Mu looked at Zhou Xiong and said, I strongly suspect that Zhou Sharon is venting his personal grudge against me. They all knew about the matter between Li Mu and Zhou Chu. Zhou Xiong was Zhou Chu's second uncle. Because of Zhou Chu's matter, it was not strange for him to oppose Li Mu. Lu Yi looked at Zhou Xiong and said, Lord Zhou, the task given by His Majesty is important. Can you put aside your personal grudge for now? Zhou Xiong snorted and said no more. Li Mu looked at him again and said, I'll say it first. If Zhou Sharon says another word, I won't care about the imperial examinations anymore. Although Zhou Xiong's expression was angry, he still kept his mouth shut. The imperial examinations were the most important thing for the Secretariat. If they delayed it, he could not bear the responsibility. Li Mu pointed to another line and said, after the imperial examinations are implemented, the officials of the 3 provinces, 6 ministries, 24 departments, 9 temples, and 36 counties will all be selected through the imperial examinations. Why is it that the Zongjing Temple is an exception? Xiao Ziyu looked up at Li Mu. Lu Yi explained, Lord Li, you may not know. Since ancient times, the officials of the Zongjing Temple have always been members of the royal family. In the past, it was not given to the students of the 4 academies. Li Mu shook his head and said, as the most important system of the imperial court in the future, under the imperial examinations, no matter if it is the 3 provinces, 6 ministries, or 9 temples, they must all be treated equally. The Zongjing Temple is no exception. Xiao Ziyu said decisively, I object. This is an ancestral system. The ancestral system cannot be abolished. Lu Yi and the others did not speak. Although the Shao clan was not entirely part of the royal family of the Great Zhou had a deep relationship with the Shao clan of the 9 families. They had common interests, so naturally, they would not give up control of the Zongjing Temple. Lu Yi and the others continued to remain silent. To them, whether the Shao clan controlled the Zongjing Temple or not did not make much of a difference. There was no need for them to interfere. The Zhou clan and the Shao clan had been fighting in the imperial court for 3 years. Although Zhou Xiong hated Li Mu, he supported him unconditionally on this matter. However, Li Mu had already said that if he did not speak, he would not interfere. His lips moved a few times, but in the end, he did not speak. Seeing that no one spoke, Li Mu looked at Zhou Xiong and said, Zhou Sharon, say something. You said so much just now. Why have you become mute? Zhou Xiong's chest rose and fell. He swallowed his anger and said, I agree with what Lord Li said. The various ministries of the imperial court should be treated equally. Why is the Zongjing Temple an exception? Xiao Ziyu said, the officials of the Zongjing Temple have always been members of the royal family. This was a rule set by the great ancestor. Li Mu smiled and said, if the officials of the Zongjing Temple are all members of the royal family, then the ones in charge of the Zongjing Temple should be the Zhou clan. Lord Zhou, don't you think so? Li Mu hit the nail on the head. Xiao Ziyu could not refute him. Lord Li's words are reasonable. Zhou Xiong quickly agreed. When he looked at Li Mu again, he found that he did not seem as annoying as before. Chapter 267. The Zongjing Temple had always had a special position in the court. Its responsibility was to manage the records of the royal family, the clan, and the relatives, and to protect the ancestral shrine. If the royal family or relatives violated the law, they would be handed over to the Zongjing Temple. Not only that, but to protect the dignity of the royal family, the Zongjing Temple's punishment was usually kept secret. To some extent, this was the privilege of the royal family. The Zongjing Temple gradually became the place of protection for the royal family. During the reign of the previous emperor, the power of the Zongjing Temple was further expanded. If an official of the fourth rank or above violated the law, they could only be judged by the Zongjing Temple. This gave the Zongjing Temple absolute power. The Shao clan used this to suppress their dissidents and protect their own people. When Zhou Zhong was reforming the law, he once proposed to abolish the Zongjing Temple's absolute power. However, he met with great resistance and did not succeed in the end. After the empress succeeded the throne, many of the rules of the previous emperor's reign were continued. The Zongjing Temple was no exception. Now, Li Mu wanted to interfere with the Zongjing Temple controlled by the Shao clan. This was equivalent to weakening the influence of the old faction of the Shao clan in the court. In the secretariat, Xiao Ziyu, who represented the interests of the Shao clan, naturally would not agree. On the other hand, Zhou Xiong, who had a grudge against Li Mu, had a common interest with him in this matter. For the Zhou clan, any action to attack the old faction was what they wanted. Li Mu looked at Xiao Ziyu and said, "Don't mention the ancestral system to me. All pedantic and backward systems should be reformed and abolished. Such an important department like the Zongjing Temple should not be monopolized by one family. The Zongjing Temple belongs to the court and His Majesty, not the Shao clan." Lu Yi and the other officials of the secretariat were speechless. Li Mu's words were still so straightforward, breaking the rules and hitting the nail on the head. Xiao Ziyu frowned. If it was Zhou Xiong who objected, he could still argue with him. However, the interests of the imperial clan temple had nothing to do with Li Mu. His words were completely from the standpoint of an outsider. He was speaking for the sake of the justice of the imperial court. No one could be so righteous as to oppose justice with selfishness. Li Mu continued, "If you insist on the ancestral system, then all the officials of the Zheng Temple today should be the Zhou clan and not the Shao clan." Zhou Xiong immediately said, "This official agrees with what Lord Li said." Xiao Ziyu didn't understand. The royal Shao family hadn't offended Li Mu. Instead, it was the Zhou family that had a life and death grudge with him. Why did he insist on speaking for the Zhou family? More importantly, he could not refute Li Mu's words. If he insisted on the ancestral system, then the Zhou family would definitely not let go of the ancestral system. At that time, they might lose everything. If he agreed to the restructuring, the Imperial Ancestral Temple would still be the current Imperial Ancestral Temple. The officials who entered the Imperial Ancestral Temple through the Imperial examinations would definitely start from the bottom and would not affect the overall situation. After comparing the two, he quickly came to a decision. He smiled and said, "I was too narrow-minded. Sir Li is right. The Imperial Ancestral Temple is the Imperial Ancestral Temple of the court. It should be treated the same as all the other ministries and should not be independent of the Imperial examinations." Walking out of the secretariat, Li Mu's face flashed with a smile. Breaking the monopoly that the old faction of the Shao clan had over the Zongjing Temple was the first step in his and Zhang Chun's plan. As for the second step, it was to find a way to infiltrate the Imperial Clan Temple. He looked back and walked out of the palace. Inside the secretariat, Xiao Ziyu stood in front of Cui Ming and said, "Li Mu proposed that the officials of the Imperial Ancestral Temple should be elected by the court in the future. I agree." Cui Ming frowned and asked, "What does the Imperial Ancestral Temple have to do with him? What is this Li Mu doing?" Xiao Ziyu said, "I feel that he should not have any other motives. This person does not have any selfish motives. Perhaps he is truly dedicated to the country." Cui Ming said, "There is no need for outsiders to interfere with the Imperial Ancestral Temple. This is a deterrent to the officials of the fourth rank and above. How can we just give it to someone else?" Xiao Ziyu shook his head and said, "Things are not that simple. To be precise, the current imperial family is the Zhou family. According to the rules, all the officials of the imperial ancestral temple should be held by the Zhou family. I agree with Li Mu that the imperial ancestral temple should temporarily belong to the Shao clan. If I disagree, the Zhou family can immediately replace it. Cui Ming thought for a moment and realized that the old party did not have a choice. In other words, they could only choose to be swallowed up in a short period of time or slowly nibbled away. Let's do as he said. No matter what, we can't let the Zhou family interfere with the imperial ancestral temple. Cui Ming thought for a moment and said, keep an eye on Li Mu. If he does anything else, inform me. Back in the divine capital, Zhang Chun walked out of the yamen and asked, how is it? Li Mu nodded and said, everything is going according to plan. Zhang Chun sighed and said, I didn't expect His Majesty to let you participate in this level of national affairs. The decision-making officials of the Secretariat, the assistant ministers, and the officials of the Secretariat, which one of them does not have a deep background, Li Mu said, this is only the first step. Next, we need to infiltrate the Imperial Ancestral Temple. This person, Zhang Chun said, let me do it. Li Mu was greatly surprised. Could a middle-aged man's jealousy really change a person's personality? Zhang Chun was always timid. When he encountered trouble, he would run away if he could and hide if he could. This time, he actually took the initiative to step forward, which really surprised Li Mu. Zhang Chun said, I still have no idea how to enter the Imperial Ancestral Temple. Li Mu said, let me think of a way. As long as the Imperial Ancestral Temple was no longer monopolized by the Shao family, it would not be difficult to arrange for him to enter the Imperial Ancestral Temple through various methods. However, Zhang Chun's changed personality made it difficult for him to adapt. Could it be that he also felt that he had offended too many people in the divine capital and decided to give up? Or had he found a new backer? Zhang Chun walked straight back to the yamen and poured 2 cups of wine. He said, to celebrate the smooth progress of the plan, let's have a drink. He picked up the wine cup and drank it in one gulp. Li Mu also picked up the wine cup. After taking a sip, he felt that the taste was a little strange and asked, what wine is this? Medicinal wine. Zhang Chun smacked his lips and said, this is my collection. This wine is brewed with deer antler more than 300 years old, ginseng, and other medicinal herbs. There's also a tiger penis that transformed into a tiger demon. If you like it, I can give it to you. Li Mu suddenly spat out the mouthful of wine that had just taken a sip. Zhang Chun said with heartache, don't waste it. Not only can this wine strengthen the body, it's also good for passing down the ancestral line and having children. Li Mu returned home and cursed Zhang Chun in his heart. This medicinal wine had a strong medicinal effect. It did not affect the mind but the body directly. After drinking it, the body would react within 15 minutes. Reciting the Clear Heart Sutra would be useless. Zhang Chun had a wife and a family. He could make up for it however he wanted. He only had a fox at home that he could see but could not touch. How was he going to pass the long night? Besides, he was a theurgy cultivator. He had already refined the 7 spirits and could control the sparrow shade freely. He did not need such a thing. As for having children, that was even more nonsense. Lu Hanyan was not around. How was he going to have a child with a ghost? Li Mu cursed Zhang Chun's lame joke in his heart. When he walked to the door, Xiaobai was already there to welcome him. Now that she had grown an extra tail, her charm had increased imperceptibly. Her figure and face had matured a lot compared to when she was 3 tails. Li Mu could not help but gulp. He felt that this action was a little strange and said awkwardly, "What did you cook today?" "It smells so good," Xiaobai was stunned. "Benefactor, you came back early today." "I haven't started cooking yet." Li Mu strode into the yard and said, "Then I'll go cook. You go to the room to cultivate. I'll call you when it's done." Xiaobai trotted over and said, "Then I'll help you, benefactor." As Xiaobai's cultivation improved, Li Mu realized that his control over her was starting to be insufficient, especially when she climbed into Li Mu's bed at night. That night, Li Mu fell into a dream again. He woke up early in the morning and went to the divine capital government. Stepping into the courtyard of the divine capital government, Li Mu was surprised to see a figure he had not seen for a long time. He strode to Li Si and asked in surprise, "Why are you here?" Chapter 268. Li Si smiled and said, "Miao Miao is focused on cultivating on Mount Baiyun. My father-in-law asked me to come to the divine capital to see the world and participate in the imperial examination in 3 months. I don't have many friends in the divine capital, so I came to find you and Lord Zhang." The Empress had already informed all the counties to select some talents to participate in the first imperial examination in the divine capital. The people who participated in the imperial examination would be selected by the local government for the first time. When the imperial examination system was perfected, even the local talents would have to go through a fair selection. With Li Si's background, it was not difficult for him to get a spot in the North County. It seemed that County Governor Chen's expectations for Li Si was not just a constable. Li Mu's cultivation had reached the 4th realm. It was easy to see that in just 2 months, Li Si had stepped into the spirit realm. In the past 2 months, County Governor Chen must have spent a lot of resources on him. Zhang Chun looked at the 2 of his former subordinates and felt emotional. A year ago, the 2 of them were constables in Yangqiu County and had not stepped into cultivation. A year later, Li Si was already in the spirit realm, and Li Mu had stepped into the middle realm. One of them was with the county governor of the North County, and the other was favored by the Empress. He could not help but sigh. It was good to be young. 3 months later, the imperial examination would begin. Li Si temporarily stayed in the inn. After leaving the court at noon, Li Mu and Zhang Chun welcomed him at the inn. When the 3 of them walked out of the divine capital and walked to the Fragrance Inn, the streets were noisy again. The prince's son-in-law is still so handsome. There's no other man in the divine capital who has his temperament. Ah, my legs go soft when I see the prince's son-in-law. Cui Ming was walking slowly on the streets as usual. As the prince's son-in-law and the assistant minister of the secretariat, he did not ride a horse or take a sedan. Every day he walked through the streets and attracted the attention of the women in the divine capital. Li Mu suspected that he was using these women to cultivate. Every time he appeared, these women would develop a strong desire for him. Some special cultivation techniques just happened to require the 7 emotions to cultivate. Li Mu couldn't see Cui Ming's lust, but judging from the situation of those women, his guess should be right. In the cultivation world, it was forbidden to steal the souls of mortals, but it was possible to obtain their 7 emotions. As long as one didn't absorb too much, this was also a righteous cultivation method. Cui Ming walked through the street. Zhang Chun looked at Cui Ming with disdain as usual. Even the way he looked at the women around him was filled with disdain. Li Si's gaze lingered on Cui Ming for a long time before he said, "This person is not simple." This was probably a kind of connection between experts. Cui Ming and Li Si were very similar in certain aspects. They were all very popular with women. But they were also fundamentally different. Li Si was a prodigal son. Although he appeared to be passionate, he was actually very loyal. Cui Ming was a beast. Although he appeared to be passionate, he was actually heartless. At the Aroma restaurant, the 3 of them ordered a table of dishes. While they were eating, Li Si said, "Before coming to the Immortal's capital, I went to White Cloud Mountain. Lady Han Yen asked me to bring you some things." Li Mu put down his chopsticks and asked, "What is it?" Li Si took out a thick stack of fulu from his sleeve and passed it to Li Mu. Li Mu took it and felt that it was quite heavy. He flipped it open and took a look. Among these talismans, there were sword talismans, 5 elemental escape talismans, and high-grade divine travel talismans. Although there weren't any heaven-grade talismans, none of them were lower than earth-grade talismans. How was this heavy fulu? It was clearly heavy love. Li Mu put away the fulu and sighed. He wanted to fly to North County right now and fly to her and Wanwan's side. But Cui Ming was not dead, so he could not leave the divine capital. After eating, Zhang Chunyan and Li Si returned to the government office and the inn. Li Mu took the token that Mr. Mei gave him and entered the palace to the secretariat. Lu Yi stood at the entrance of the secretariat. She had been waiting for a long time. When she saw Li Mu, she finally let out a sigh of relief and said, "If Lord Li did not come, I would have gone out to invite you." There were only 3 months left until the imperial examination. But until now, the secretariat had not even discussed a perfect imperial examination system. After the system was perfected, it would be submitted to the secretariat for review and then to the secretariat for implementation. This would delay a lot of time. If it delayed any longer, the imperial examination would be delayed. In the end, they would be the ones to take the blame. Over the past 2 days, after endless discussion, Li Mu had gone from being an advisor to being the leader. Every idea he put forward regarding the imperial examinations was reasonable and flawless. It could be said that whether or not the Hall of Governmental Affairs could complete the task the emperor had given them depended entirely on Li Mu. Li Mu smiled and said, "I met a friend I had not seen for a long time this morning. We had a good chat and came a little late. Please forgive me, Lord Lu." Lu Yi waved her hand and said, "It's okay. Let's go in quickly. The lords had been waiting for a long time." 2 days ago, everyone had discussed the details of the imperial examination. But there was still an important problem that had not been solved. The imperial examination was a way to produce court officials. It was very important. So which department of the court should be responsible for such an important matter? Everyone knew that no matter which department was responsible for the imperial examination, that department's position in the court would be greatly improved. Both the new party and the old party were not willing to let go of this opportunity. Zhou Xiong suggested the Ministry of Rights because the Minister of Rights was a member of the new party. Xiao Ziyu suggested the Ministry of Appointments because the imperial examination produced officials. The Ministry of Appointments was responsible for the imperial examination. Of course, everyone present knew that the Ministry of Personnel, from top to bottom, from inside to outside, was supported by the old faction of the Xiao clan. The Ministry of Personnel was in charge of the imperial examinations, which meant that the old faction was in charge of the imperial examinations. This was yet another confrontation between the new party and the old party. It was clear that neither party wanted to give in on the matter of the imperial examination, nor would they give in. The other 4 officials did not want to participate in the battle between the new party and the old party. They tacitly kept silent. At this time, Li Mu cleared his throat and said, "Since the 2 of you have different opinions, then let me say something fair." Everyone looked at Li Mu. Li Mu looked at them and said slowly, "The imperial examination is a very important matter. It concerns the future of the court. If any department is responsible for it alone, it could lead to arbitrary monopolization. It is not good for the stability of the court. Since one of you suggested the Ministry of Rights and the other suggested the Ministry of Appointments, why don't we let the Ministry of Appointments and the Ministry of Rights handle it together? The 2 departments will supervise each other and maintain the fairness of the imperial examination. What do you think?" Let Zhou Xiong and Xiao Ziyu continue to be in a deadlock, and the discussion would never be able to progress. Li Mu's suggestion was a good solution. Lu Yi thought for a while and said, "Lord Li is very thoughtful." Wang Shi nodded and said, "I agree with Lord Li. Let's let the Ministry of Rights and the Ministry of Appointments handle it together." Zhang Huili and Song Liangyu also agreed. Out of the 6 officials, 4 expressed their opinions. Zhou Xiong and Xiao Ziyu looked at each other and did not argue. It was a tacit agreement. If they continued arguing like this, there would never be a result. As long as the authority of the imperial examination was not monopolized by the other party, they would have achieved their goal. At this moment, Li Mu spoke again. He looked around at everyone and said, "Although the imperial examination is jointly managed by the Ministry of Rights and the Ministry of Appointments, there is no guarantee that the officials of the 2 departments will not collude with each other and shake the foundation of the Great Zhou's selection of officials. Why don't we let the imperial clan temple supervise and completely prevent the officials of the 2 departments from colluding with each other? What do you all think?" They thought for a while and felt that Li Mu's words made sense. Although everyone knew that the Ministry of Appointments and the Ministry of Rights could not collude, it did not mean that they would not in the future. Now, the two departments represented the interests of different parties. But what about 10 years later, decades later, or centuries later? It was clear that Zhou Xiong and Xiao Ziyu were focused on the present. Li Mu was worried about the future. As expected, he had the heart to create eternal peace for the great Zhou. As for why it was the imperial clan temple, no one thought about it. After all, the officials of the Ministry of Appointments and the Ministry of Rights were not low-ranking officials. Only the imperial clan temple was qualified to intimidate and punish the officials of the two departments. Li Mu continued, there are not many officials in the imperial clan temple. Now, there is only one temple chancellor, one vice-chancellor, and one deputy temple chancellor. The rest are low-ranking officials. Now, they are handling the affairs of the temple. Naturally, there is enough manpower. If we add the supervision of the imperial examination, I'm afraid that you will be too busy. Do we need to expand the number of officials in the imperial clan temple? Lu Yi thought for a while and praised, Lord Li is really meticulous. You have taken care of everything. Wang Shi said, we did not think of this at all. Fortunately, Lord Li reminded us. Song Liangyu said, in that case, send a letter to the Ministry of Appointments and ask the Ministry of Appointments to ask His Majesty to expand the number of officials in the imperial clan temple as soon as possible. An hour later, in the Assistant Minister's office of the Secretariat, Cui Ming put down his teacup and said slowly, although we did not obtain the right to hold the imperial examination, we did not let the Zhou family get it either. This result is already very good. As for the imperial clan temple, why does Li Mu keep holding on to the imperial clan temple? Xiao Ziyu said indifferently, anyway, the imperial clan temple is our people. It doesn't matter. Cui Ming frowned and said, I keep feeling that he is plotting something. Forget it, I must be thinking too much. Chapter 269. The expansion of the Zongjing Temple was a very complicated matter. First, the Hall of Secretaries had to make a decision and hand it over to the Hall of Secretaries. If the Hall of Secretaries felt that it was necessary, they would hand it over to the Minister of State Affairs. The Minister of State Affairs had no objections. Finally, the order would be passed to the Ministry of Appointments. The Ministry of Appointments would register and appoint new officials. It took quite a bit of time to pass down the government decrees between the various departments. If it was in the past, this matter could drag on for months to half a year. However, this time, in just 2 days, the Ministry of Appointments had already confirmed this matter and added a Shaoqing and a deputy to the Zongjing Temple. The Hall of Secretaries passed down the suggestion, and it was approved by the Hall of Secretaries. After it was passed to the Hall of Secretaries, the Hall of Secretaries immediately ordered the Ministry of Personnel to carry it out. The imperial examination was the most important matter in the imperial court. Time was tight, and there was no room for delay. Now, they only needed to decide who would take over the positions of Shaoqing and deputy to form a balance between the three departments. Great Zhou's official selection system had to do with the rank of the officials. Officials of rank 3 and above were personally selected by the emperor. Officials of this rank were the heads of their departments, and only the emperor had the power to appoint and move them. Officials above the 5th rank were nominated by the palace secretary and decided by the Minister of State. Finally, they were submitted to the emperor for approval, and the Ministry of Appointments would listen to the rules and confer officials. Officials below the 5th rank were conferred by the Ministry of Appointments after reporting to the Minister of State for approval based on the officials' assessment results. Shaoqing was a secondary rank 4 official, while the Zongjing deputy was a primary rank 5 official. They needed to be nominated by the Hall of Secretaries and then passed to the Minister of State Affairs for final decision. Regarding the choice of Shaoqing, Zhou Xiong and Xiao Ziyu, who represented the new and old parties, started arguing again. Xiao Ziyu chose an official from the old party, but Zhou Xiong naturally did not agree. The Zongjing Temple was originally in the hands of the old party. If it was still someone from the old party after the expansion, then wouldn't all his previous efforts be wasted? Seeing that the two were in a stalemate, Lu Yi finally could not help but say, "Since the two of you cannot agree, I will choose another person." Lu Biao, the imperial censor, is impartial and has the trust of the people. He can take the position of Shaoqing. Everyone looked at Lu. Lu Yi was obviously taking the opportunity to promote the Lu family's descendants. The officials of the imperial censorate were responsible for impeaching the officials and did not have much real power. However, it was different after entering the imperial censorate. Especially now that the imperial censorate had the responsibility of supervising the imperial examinations, the position of vice minister was one of the hottest positions in the imperial court. The few of them also wanted to compete, but none of them had the qualifications to take up the position of clan head, so they could only give up. The reason why Xiao Ziyu proposed the old party members was to prevent Zhou Xiong from arranging the new party members into the Zongjing Temple. Although Lady Lu was not part of the new party, she had always been neutral. Letting Lu Biao be the Zongjing Shaoqing was better than having someone else. The person he nominated still had to be decided by the Minister of War. The Minister of War was the leader of the new party. It was unlikely that he would agree with the people of the old party. He finally looked at Lu Yi and said, "Censor Lu is fair and impartial. I have nothing to say about him sitting in this position." Zhou Xiong looked at Lu Yi and did not object. Although he wanted to arrange his own people to enter the Zongjing Temple, Xiao Ziyu would not agree. If he insisted, he would offend Lu Yi. He could only say, "I also agree." He and Xiao Ziyu looked at each other and saw some information from each other's eyes. The dispute between them could not continue in this way. Otherwise, if the two of them were in a deadlock every time, the one who would benefit in the end would be the outsiders. Xiao Ziyu's lips moved slightly and said a few words to Zhou Xiong. Zhou Xiong looked at him and also moved his lips. The two of them looked at each other and seemed to have reached some kind of agreement. There was only one imperial censorate position left. Xiao Ziyu nominated another person from the old party. It was rare that Zhou Xiong did not object. Anyway, the people in the Zongjing Temple were all from the old party. It did not matter if there was one more or one less. Lu Yi and the others also did not raise any objections. Just when everyone was about to continue the discussion, a voice suddenly sounded. "I object." Li Mu looked at Xiao Ziyu and said, "In the future, the Zongjing Temple will not only deal with the affairs of the imperial family, but also supervise the imperial examinations. It will be responsible for the cases of officials of the 4th rank and above. It is not enough to have one just and strict official. The Shendu magistrate Zhang Chun is selfless and is more suitable for this position." Xiao Ziyu said, "Isn't he already the Shendu magistrate?" Li Mu said, "Before Zhang Chun, the position of Shendu magistrate was also held by other officials. He can hold the position of Shendu magistrate and imperial censorate deputy at the same time." Xiao Ziyu shook his head and said, "There is no need for that. The Shendu magistrate has a heavy responsibility. If he holds the position of imperial censorate deputy at the same time, he will not be able to handle both sides well." Lu Yi and the others also said, "Lord Xiao is right. We have wasted too much time today. Let's quickly discuss the follow-up matters." Everyone agreed. Li Mu covered his mouth and yawned. He said, "Let's end it here today. I am a bit sleepy. Lords, please continue your discussion. I will return to the office to rest." They looked at Li Mu in shock. Any magical power cultivator could go days without sleep. How could he be sleepy so early in the morning? Unless he did something last night and used up a large amount of essence and spiritual power. The problem was, Li Mu was still full of energy and gave them many wonderful ideas. Why was he suddenly sleepy? It was clear that he was dissatisfied with the fact that his proposal to nominate Zhang Chun as the deputy of the Imperial Clan Temple was rejected by everyone. Xiao Ziyu looked at Li Mu and said, "Since Lord Li is sleepy, please go back and rest." Li Mu stood up and said, "Oh right, there is one more thing. I will be returning to the North region to visit my family tomorrow. I will not be back for half a month. Lords, please do not wait for me tomorrow." Lu Yi was stunned. "Visit your family?" Li Mu nodded and said, "I have been separated from my wife for more than 2 months. I really miss her. I hope you can forgive me. After a few days of discussion, the few officials of the Secretariat were very clear that in the process of perfecting the imperial examination system, they could do without any of them except for Li Mu. When the imperial court wanted to promulgate a policy as important as the imperial examination, it would often take half a year, or even several years of preparation to ensure that there would not be too many mistakes. It was not difficult for them to come up with a system to replace the Academy's selection of officials within a month. The difficult thing was that this system had no loopholes or flaws. Once the system was implemented, how would they explain it to the imperial court if they found the flaws in it? Li Mu had a deep understanding of the imperial examination system. Up until now, the framework of the imperial examination system was almost entirely built by him. Now was the most critical moment. If Li Mu left, the subsequent perfection of the imperial examination system would immediately be lost. Lu Yi hurriedly said, "Lord Li, you can wait for a while about the family visit. The imperial examination is the most important thing now. I hope you can put the country's affairs first." Li Mu thought for a while and nodded. "Lord Lu, you're right. I am narrow-minded. How can personal affairs be compared to national affairs?" So he sat down again and said, "Let's continue." Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Lu Yi continued to talk about a problem that had not been solved yet. As for the number of candidates sent by the 36 counties, how should we determine it? If the 36 counties are the same, it will be unfair to the large counties with a large population like the Middle Region. If they are not the same, I am afraid that the other 30 counties will have objections. We must have a reasonable arrangement to stop people from talking. Many times, it was not a matter of whether the policy was feasible or not. It was a matter of whether it was reasonable or not and whether it could convince the public. The discussion was fruitless and they habitually looked at Li Mu. Lu Yi asked, "Lord Li, what do you think?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I don't have any opinions." Lu Yi thought that he really did not have any opinions. He shook his head and said, "Then let's put this matter aside for now. Let's continue to discuss the next matter." When they discussed again, they saw Li Mu frowning and shaking his head slightly. They knew that he was dissatisfied with the results of the discussion. Based on his experience in the past few days, he was always able to come up with better and more perfect suggestions. Lu Yi looked at Li Mu again and asked, "Does Lord Li have any better ideas?" Li Mu shook his head and stood up. He said, "It is getting late. I should go back and cook. Lords, see you tomorrow." They looked at each other and suddenly understood something. Lu Yi lowered his head and was silent for a moment. He suddenly said, "I think that there is still room for discussion as to who should be the deputy of the Imperial Clan Temple." Wang Shi said, "The person that Lord Xiao just nominated is not qualified enough. I am afraid that he will not be able to convince the public." Zhang Huili agreed. "I think that the Shendu prefect Zhang Chun is qualified for the position of the Imperial Clan Temple deputy." Song Liangyu said, "Lord Zhang is impartial. No one is more suitable for this position. Lord Xiao, what do you think?" Xiao Ziyu was stared at by everyone. He knew that the duck that he had just cooked was about to fly away. At the same time, he received a message from Lu Yi and the others. "Lord Xiao, the big picture is more important. Don't delay the schedule for a little personal gain. It is just a 5th-rank official. If he wants it, then give it to him." Xiao Ziyu's face was gloomy. The 4 officials of the Secretariat sent him messages at the same time. Under such circumstances, he had no other choice. He took a deep breath and calmed down. He said, "I will listen to you, lords." Zhou Xiong was naturally happy that someone from the old party could not be the deputy of the Imperial Clan Temple. He said, "I have no objections." Just like that, the Shendu prefect Zhang Chun, as a fair and impartial official who was not afraid of the powerful and dared to speak up for the people, was elected unanimously in the Secretariat. He successfully held the position of the Imperial Clan Temple deputy. Li Mu sat down and said, "I will not starve to death even if I skip a meal. The Imperial examination is more important. What do you think, lords?" Everyone put on a fake smile. Lord Li is really righteous. Chapter 270. Zhang Chun had only been in Fairy's capital for a short period of time. In just 2 months, he had been promoted from Divine Capital Commandant to Fairy's Capital Magistrate. This was already an unbelievable speed. It was impossible for him to hold the position of Imperial Ancestral Temple's deputy. However, Li Mu's attitude was clear. He would not give this position to Zhang Chun. He would not care about the imperial examinations anymore. This was a blatant threat, but the 6 of them could do nothing about it. He had the right to threaten them. For this matter, it didn't matter if any of the 6 imperial secretaries of the Secretariat were missing, but Li Mu couldn't be missing. Even if he was threatened, he could only grit his teeth and accept it. It was just a small Imperial Ancestral Temple's deputy. Compared to the imperial examinations, it was not worth mentioning. After an hour, Li Mu left the Imperial Secretariat. Cui Ming paced around the Assistant Minister's office and muttered, "Imperial Ancestral Temple, it's Imperial Ancestral Temple again. Why is it always the Imperial Ancestral Temple? What is this person trying to do?" After leaving the Imperial Secretariat, Li Mu did not return to the office or go home. Instead, he went to the great music bar. "Brother-in-law, you haven't been here in a long time. I just learned a new song. I'll play it for you later. Where's your little follower? Why isn't she here today?" In the backyard of the great music bar, Chimey, Little 76, and the other girls surrounded Li Mu and chattered. Li Mu said, "I've been busy with work recently. I'll visit you guys when I have time." He called Chimey to the side and asked, "Do you have a theater in Fairy's capital?" Chimey was puzzled. "Why are you asking this? Do you want to watch a play? The owner has a theater, and business is not bad," Li Mu said. "Call your owner out." Chimey did not know what Li Mu wanted to do, but it still obediently called the owner of the great music bar over. The owner of the Miaoying Lane was a middle-aged woman. When she saw Li Mu, her face was full of smiles. She jogged over and said, "Oh, Lord Li, what wind blew today that brought you here?" In the past, the great music workshop was just an ordinary workshop in Luoyang. There were dozens of such workshops in Luoyang. The musicians in the workshop would sometimes be bullied when they met guests with power and influence. Ever since Jiangzhou was beheaded, such a thing had never happened. All of this was naturally because of Li Mu. The owner of the Miaoying Lane had already instructed that as long as Constable Li came here in the future, the lane would not take a single cent from him and would even arrange the best seat for him. With such a backer in Luoyang, she would be able to earn money in peace in the future. Li Mu went straight to the point and asked, "I heard that you have a theater in the Fairy's capital?" The middle-aged woman was stunned for a moment but quickly reacted. She said, "Does Constable Li like to listen to plays? I'll arrange it for you right away. Just tell me what you want to listen to and I'll arrange it for you," Li Mu explained. "I'm not here to listen to plays. I have a favor to ask of you." The Pear Blossom Pavilion was located in the Rosy Lane of Luoyang. It was a rather famous theater in the Fairy's capital. The cultured people of Luoyang liked to hang out in theaters and music halls. Although actors and actresses were of low status and were often looked down upon by others, theater was an elegant art in the eyes of the influential people in Luoyang. Many influential people had musicians and actors and actresses in their homes so that they could listen to them sing and dance at any time, especially the women. Some of the noble ladies in Luoyang were good at this. It was said that in the Western Palace, one of the concubines of the late emperor was a famous actress in Luoyang. Later, the late emperor took a fancy to her and she became a phoenix. When the late emperor was still alive, he liked theater very much. He would often gather his officials to watch the performances in the palace together. The theater culture in Luoyang rose at that time and had not declined to this day. He abandoned his wife and child and even wanted to kill his wife and child. Such a beast is not worthy of being a human. There are such stories in theater. How can there be such a heartless person in reality? Reality is often scarier than theater. However, the scene of the heartless person being struck by lightning at the end was too satisfying. A few guests walked out of the Pear Blossom Pavilion and were still discussing a new play that had just been released a few days ago. The play was called Xianxia. It was about a heartless man who abandoned his wife and child in order to get close to a princess and enjoy the glory and wealth. He even killed people to keep them quiet. In the end, he was judged by an upright official and was struck to death by the heavens. The plot of the play was complicated and bizarre. The story was interconnected and had many twists and turns. The ending was satisfying. Once it was released, it quickly spread in Luoyang. Many theaters had already smelled the business opportunity and bought the script from the Pear Blossom Pavilion at a high price, preparing to imitate it. The storytellers in the tea houses and brothels were one step ahead of them. They turned the play into a story and acted it out vividly to attract customers. On the streets of Luoyang, there were also passers-by who hummed the lines from Xianxia as they walked. It had been a long time since such a good play had appeared in Luoyang. Once it was released, it had a very high popularity among the common people. Imperial Secretariat. A manager sat in the yamen. As he organized the plan for the imperial examination, he hummed, "Su the current emperor's son-in-law. Deceiving the emperor, disrespecting the emperor, killing his wife and child, losing his conscience." This was the new play that he had heard with his wife in a theater in Luoyang yesterday during his break. The lines in the play were very classic. He remembered it after listening to it once. As he hummed, he suddenly felt a chill down his spine. He could not help but shiver. He turned his head and saw Left Assistant Minister Cui Ming standing behind him. His face was as dark as water. The manager was shocked. He immediately stood up and said respectfully, "Lord Assistant Minister." Cui Ming's face was cold. He asked, "What did you say just now?" The manager said nervously, "It's just a few lines from the play. I just sang it casually." Cui Ming said coldly, "Sing it again." The manager was stunned for a moment. He then sang honestly, "Su the current emperor's son-in-law. Deceiving the emperor, disrespecting the emperor, killing his wife and child, losing his conscience." Seeing that the Lord Assistant Minister's face was getting darker and darker, he finally realized something. His face turned pale. He quickly explained, "Lord Assistant Minister, please don't misunderstand. The emperor's son-in-law who killed his wife and child was the emperor's son-in-law in the play. It's definitely not referring to you." Cui Ming's face turned even uglier. He asked, "Which theater in Luoyang is this play from?" The manager said, "It's called Xianxia. Almost all the theaters are singing it. It's said that it even spread to the palace yesterday. A few concubines in the Western Palace specially called a troupe to perform in the palace." As soon as he finished speaking, a palace maid knocked on the door and walked in. She said, "Emperor's son-in-law, the concubines have called a troupe to watch a play in the Western Palace. Her Highness the Princess has also entered the palace. She asked me to invite you." Cui Ming asked, "What play?" The palace maid said, "It's called Xianxia. It's been sung outside the palace." Cui Ming's face darkened. He said, "Go back and tell the princess that I have something important to do here. I can't leave. I won't be going. You killed your wife and child, losing your conscience. You forced Han Qi to her death in the temple. You put the indictment in my hall. You're so determined. Which one are you?" Li Mu hummed the opera and came to the Luoyang Yamen. He asked the owner of Miaoying Lane to help promote Xianxia. Classic was a classic. Once it was released, it became popular in Luoyang. He had to thank the late emperor. If he didn't like opera and supported the arts industry in Luoyang, there wouldn't be such a popular culture today. The case of the chopping of beauties was just a prelude to what he was about to do. The real highlight was yet to come. The Ministry of Personnel didn't act quickly. It took Zhang Chun half a month to receive the appointment from the Ministry of Personnel. From today onwards, besides being the Luoyang magistrate, he had another identity. He was the deputy of the Imperial Clan Temple. In the Luoyang Yamen, Li Mu looked at Zhang Chun and asked seriously, "Old Zhang, are you sure? This time, you'll offend Princess Yunyang, the royal family, the old party, and many, many people." Zhang Chun's eyes were firm. He said, "Say no more." Cui Ming and I are absolutely irreconcilable. Li Mu nodded and said, Then let's go. Zhang Chun said, I have another question. Li Mu asked, What is it? Zhang Chun looked at him and asked, Why haven't I heard of Her Majesty summoning you recently? Speaking of this, Li Mu was a little embarrassed. Ever since the Empress broke into his dream and saw something she shouldn't have, they hadn't met again. Whether it was in reality or in his dream, the closest they were to each other was when they went to court. There was still a curtain between them. Li Mu said, Her Majesty and I have some misunderstandings. Misunderstandings? Zhang Chun's face turned pale. He asked nervously, What misunderstandings? Li Mu shook his head and said, It's not convenient for me to tell you. Not convenient? Zhang Chun thought about it and seemed to realize something. As a middle-aged man, he knew very well what could affect the relationship between a man and a woman the most. If one aspect wasn't harmonious, it would be difficult for other aspects to be harmonious. He looked at Li Mu and said reluctantly, My jar of medicinal wine is under the table in my room. Take it with you when you go back. Chapter 271. Li Mu naturally did not need Zhang Chun's medicinal wine. Other unorthodox cultivators might need to use external items to nourish their bodies, but Buddhist and Daoist cultivators did not need to. Daoist cultivators refined the 7 spirits, especially the sparrow-yin spirit. They had sufficient kidney energy and did not need nourishment. Buddhist cultivators directly cultivated their bodies. Even if their bodies were as strong as an ox, there was no need for nourishment. Of course, there was no difference in nourishment for Buddhist abstinence. This medicinal wine might be the icing on the cake, but Li Mu did not need it at the moment. Drinking a mouthful would cause him to dream for an entire night. Li Mu did not want to experience that feeling again. Forget it. Zhang Chun shook his head and walked out of the office. He said, I'm going to the Zongjing Temple. The Zongjing Temple mainly dealt with the affairs of the royal family. Like the 3 provinces, the temple was located in the palace. Zhang Chun entered the palace with the token of the Zongjing Temple's deputy and came to the entrance of the temple. The 2 guards at the entrance came up to him and asked, Sir, what brings you to the Zongjing Temple? Zhang Chun took out his token and said, I'm the newly appointed deputy of the Zongjing Temple. The 2 guards had long heard that the Zongjing Temple had expanded with an additional deputy and deputy. After seeing the token, they immediately said respectfully, Greetings, deputy. Please come in. One of them brought Zhang Chun to a remote office and said, Sir, the deputy has already made arrangements. This will be your office in the future. Zhang Chun asked, Where are the deputy and deputy? The guard said, When there is nothing important, the 2 of them will not come here. Deputy Lu just came and left. Deputy Feng is taking an afternoon nap. When he wakes up, I will report to him. Zhang Chun moved a chair and sat down. He said, This is my first time at the Zongjing Temple. Tell me what I have to do on a daily basis. The Zhanggu said, The most important thing for the Zongjing Temple is to manage the affairs of the royal family. If a member of the royal family gives birth to a child, it must be reported to the Zongjing Temple in a timely manner so that the royal bloodline can be recorded in the pedigree. When a member of the royal family is conferred a title, it must also be recorded by the Zongjing Temple. When a member of the royal family is to be conferred a title, it must also be recorded by the Zongjing Temple. Zhang Chun asked, Do the imperial clan's relatives, and officials above the 4th rank also have to be tried by the imperial clan temple? Zhang Gu stared blankly for a moment before nodding his head and saying, According to the law, if a member of the imperial family or a high-ranking official violates the law, only the imperial clan temple can judge him. Although this was the law, if a member of the royal family or a high official of the country who needed to be judged by the imperial clan temple committed a crime, they could settle it with their own power. How could they be judged by the imperial clan temple unless they committed a rebellion? Zhang Chun continued to ask, What's the process of the imperial clan temple's trial? Zhang Gu said, First, we have to summon the member of the imperial family or the official who violated the law. Zhang Chun said indifferently, "Go to the secretariat and summon the left assistant minister of the secretariat, Cui Ming." Zhang Gu stared blankly for a moment, suspecting that he had heard wrongly. Wasn't the left assistant minister of the secretariat the emperor's son-in-law? Did he eat a bear's heart and leopard's guts to summon the emperor's son-in-law? Didn't you hear? Zhang Chun repeated, "Go to the secretariat and summon the left assistant minister of the secretariat, Cui Ming. He is involved in a major case." Zhang Gu stared blankly for a moment, then clutched his stomach and said, "Lord, this lowly official suddenly has an unbearable abdominal pain. I need to go to the toilet, please forgive me." After saying that, he ignored Zhang Chun and ran out like a wisp of smoke. In another yamen, Zhang Gu hurriedly ran in and shook the person sleeping on the table awake. He hurriedly said, "Lord Feng, it's not good, it's not good." Deputy Minister Feng, who was disturbed from his good sleep, raised his head. A trace of anger appeared on his face as he asked, "What's the matter? Why are you so flustered?" The Zhang Gu said, "The new deputy temple head is here." Deputy Minister Feng frowned and said, "If he's here, so be it. But do I have to personally welcome him?" Zhang Gu said in a panic, "No, he just arrived at the Imperial Clan Temple and wants to summon Assistant Minister Cui for questioning. What should this lowly official do?" Hearing the two words, Assistant Minister Cui, Deputy Minister Feng immediately sobered up and asked, "Assistant Minister Cui, which Assistant Minister Cui?" Zhang Gu said, "Assistant Minister of the Secretariat, Cui Ming, Princess Yunyang's son-in-law." Deputy Minister Feng stood up and said in shock, "Is he crazy? It's his first day at the Imperial Clan Temple. He hasn't even settled down in his position, yet he dares to find trouble with Prince Consort Cui?" After Zhang Gu left, Zhang Chun waited in the yamen. He didn't see Zhang Gu, but a man wearing the same official uniform as him came. The man walked in and introduced himself. "I'm Feng Jie, Deputy Minister of the Imperial Clan Temple." Zhang Chun cupped his hands and said, "So it's Lord Feng." "Sorry for the disrespect," Deputy Minister Feng asked. "I heard that Lord Zhang wants to summon Assistant Minister Cui. May I know what crime Assistant Minister Cui has committed?" Zhang Chun said, "The Imperial Clan Temple has summoned him. I'll confront him face to face and I'll know." Deputy Minister Feng said, "Lord Cui is the prince consort of the current dynasty. His status is honorable, and he's also the assistant minister of the secretariat. He has to deal with a myriad of state affairs every day. Who knows how many state affairs are waiting for him to deal with? How can we summon him just because we want to? If we delay the state's affairs, which one of us can bear the responsibility?" Zhang Chun snorted and said, "So what if he's the prince consort of the current dynasty? So what if he's the assistant minister of the secretariat? A life for a life, a debt must be paid. I don't care if he has to deal with a myriad of state affairs every day. If he violates the law, he should be judged." Deputy Minister Feng said, "Tell me first, what crime did Assistant Minister Cui commit?" Zhang Chun said coldly, "He killed his fiancée and framed her entire family. Shouldn't I summon him?" "A bunch of nonsense." Deputy Minister Feng said, "Everyone knows that Lord Cui's wife is Princess Yunyang. How can you frame him here?" Zhang Chun said indifferently, "Whether I'm framing him or not, you'll know when you summon Cui Ming." Deputy Minister Feng's expression was uncertain. Zhang Chun seemed to be very certain about this matter. This made him, who originally didn't believe it, start to waver. He also knew a little about Assistant Minister Cui's past. He was originally the son-in-law of the Zhejiang prefectural governor. Later, the Zhejiang prefectural governor colluded with the demon sect and his entire family was massacred. Cui Ming made a meritorious report and was placed in an important position by the previous emperor. In more than 10 years, he went from being a small official to marrying a princess and becoming an important official in the court. No one remembered his past. Cui Ming was a pillar of the old party. Deputy Minister Feng didn't dare to slight him. He looked at Zhang Chun and said, "This case is of great importance. I'll first report it to the deputy minister and ask him to make a decision." Finished speaking, he walked out of the Imperial Clan Temple. However, he didn't leave the palace. Instead, he went around to the back gate of the Hall of Secretaries. He summoned the gatekeeper and said, "I'm the Deputy Minister of the Imperial Clan Temple, Feng Jie. Go and report to Assistant Minister Cui that I have an important matter to discuss with him." The gatekeeper said, "Sir, please wait a moment. I'll go and report to Lord Cui." Before long, Cui Ming walked out. Deputy Minister Feng hurriedly went up to him and said, "Greetings, Prince Consort." Cui Ming glanced at him indifferently and asked, "What business do you have with me?" Deputy Minister Feng asked, "Does Prince Consort know that a new deputy minister has come to the Imperial Clan Temple?" Cui Ming glanced at him and asked, "Is this related to the important matter you're looking for me for?" "It's related, it's greatly related," Deputy Minister Feng said. "On the first day he came to the Imperial Clan Temple, he wanted to summon Prince Consort. He said that you're involved in a major case and summoned you to the Imperial Clan Temple. I've already temporarily put this matter on hold. I don't dare to make a decision on my own, so I immediately came to find Prince Consort. I'm involved in a case?" Cui Ming frowned and asked, "What case?" Deputy Minister Feng lowered his head and said, "I don't dare to say." Cui Ming said coldly, "Speak." Deputy Minister Feng trembled and said, "He said that you killed your fiancée and even framed her entire clan, causing the deaths of dozens of people. Ridiculous." Cui Ming looked at him coldly and said, "What kind of status do you have? You believe such ridiculous words?" Deputy Minister Feng heard this and finally relaxed. He hurriedly said, "Of course I don't believe it. Prince Consort is someone who places righteousness above family. How could you do something worse than a beast?" He revealed a smile and said, "I'll be going back first." Seeing Deputy Minister Feng leave, Cui Ming's face gradually darkened. It had been 20 years since the incident. Everyone in the Chu clan had been sentenced to death for colluding with the heretical cultivation. He had personally seen his entire family, including the servants, decapitated and their souls scattered. Other than him, no one else knew about this matter. How did the new Imperial Clan Temple minister find out? Moreover, the words Imperial Clan Temple sounded familiar to him. The more he thought about it, the more familiar it seemed. However, he had never been to the Imperial Clan Temple and had never had any interactions with the officials of the Imperial Clan Temple. He returned to the secretariat with deep thoughts. Coincidentally, a few people walked out of a yamen. "Take care, Lord Li. Lord Li, you've worked hard. It's finally over." These days, it's all thanks to Lord Li. Several officials from the secretariat escorted Li Mu out. With Li Mu's help, after half a month of discussion, the complete imperial examination system was finally settled. When Li Mu walked out of the secretariat, he turned his head and looked at Cui Ming standing in the courtyard. He smiled faintly. This smile seemed to strike Cui Ming's mind like a bolt of lightning. The Imperial Clan Temple. He finally remembered where his sense of familiarity with the Imperial Clan Temple came from. It came from Li Mu. In the past half a month, Li Mu had used the imperial examination discussion to first break the situation where the old faction of the Shao clan completely controlled the Imperial Clan Temple. Then, he proposed that the Imperial Clan Temple supervise the imperial examination and took the opportunity to expand the number of officials in the Imperial Clan Temple. Then he threatened the 6 officials from the Secretariat to give Zhang Chun the position of Deputy Minister of the Imperial Clan Temple. This series of abnormal and strange actions had once puzzled Cui Ming for a long time. Li Mu shouldn't have gone through so much trouble, and it wasn't very likely that it was just to send his subordinate to the Imperial Clan Temple. On the first day that Zhang Chun came to the Imperial Clan Temple, he summoned him. The reason for the summons was about the old matter from 20 years ago. This wasn't a coincidence. Before this, everything that Li Mu did was to pave the way for today's matter. He was Li Mu's ultimate goal. All of this was linked, layer by layer. In the past half a month, Li Mu had approached his goal step by step. Cui Ming even suspected that Li Mu didn't hesitate to become enemies with the 4 great academies. reform the Great Zhou's official selection system, and propose the imperial examination. Was it just to take the opportunity to interfere with the imperial clan temple? For today, this person's scheming was deep, and his plans were meticulous. It was terrifying. Thinking back to Li Mu's meaningful smile just now, Cui Ming only felt his entire body turn cold. A chill rushed from his tailbone to the top of his head. Li Mu, what a deep scheme. There were many things he had done there that he couldn't let others know about. With the secret in the deepest part of his heart exposed, Cui Ming's mind was no longer in the secretariat. He left the palace again and returned to the prince consort's residence. He had 2 permanent residences in the palace. One was Princess Yunyang's residence, and the other was the prince consort's residence that the previous emperor had bestowed upon him. After entering the prince consort's residence, Cui Ming directly walked into the deepest courtyard. The entire prince consort's residence was covered by a large formation. This formation was extremely powerful and could withstand the attacks of Dongshuan's cultivators for a moment. The innermost courtyard was where Cui Ming usually cultivated. No one in the residence was allowed to enter. The courtyard was also covered by a formation. The divine capital was the safest place in the Great Zhou. Under the protection of 2 layers of formations, even a fly couldn't fly into the prince consort's residence. Cui Ming stepped into the courtyard. Standing in the middle of the courtyard, he said, "I need you to make a trip to Yangqiu County in the North County. Check if there are any fish that escaped the net in the Chu clan back then. If there aren't any, search for all the ghosts in Yangqiu County." Back then, I hadn't set foot on the path of cultivation, so I'm not sure if Chu Yun has become a Yin spirit. As soon as Cui Ming finished speaking, a human face suddenly appeared on an old tree in the courtyard. The face was old, and the patterns on the tree bark were like wrinkles on the face. The surface of the old tree rose and fell. An old man in brown walked out of the trunk. After nodding slightly at Cui Ming, he walked out of the prince consort's residence without a word. Cui Ming looked up at the sky and clenched his fists. He said in a low voice, "Li Mu, what grudge do I have with you? How can you go against me like this?" The divine capital Yamen. Li Mu learned about what had just happened in the Zongjing temple from Zhang Chun. Sure enough, even if they broke into the Zongjing temple, it was still impossible to deal with Cui Ming. Even if it was a simple summons, they would encounter heavy resistance. Cui Ming's status in the old party was extremely high. He was the prince consort and the assistant minister of the secretariat. He controlled the state's affairs. Other than Zhang Chun and the new vice minister Liu Biao, the rest of the people in the Zongjing temple were from the old party. Especially the minister of the Zongjing temple, who was the king of the Great Zhou. He had absolute control over the Zongjing temple. At present, they still had to make a big deal out of this. The script of Qin Shimi was given to the owner of the Miaoying Lane by Li Mu. She asked her performers to turn it into an opera as quickly as possible. Under her deliberate promotion, she sold the script to other opera houses at a low price. Only then could such a phenomenal play be produced. Once Cui Ming's matter was exposed, with the popularity of Qin Shimi, it would probably set off a frenzy of public opinion in the divine capital. The imperial court could care less about anything except public opinion. This was closely related to the faith of the people. It was related to the continuation of the Great Zhou. The next day, the tri-daily morning court session was held as scheduled. In the last few court sessions, the officials were discussing the imperial examination. They were contributing to the Secretariat's policy. Just yesterday, the Secretariat had completed the formulation of the imperial examination policy. The next thing to do was for the various departments to implement it as soon as possible. The talents recommended by the 36 prefectures had already left for the divine capital. They had to complete all matters related to the imperial examination within 2 months. The morning court session today ended after more than 4 hours of discussion. Just when everyone thought they could leave, a voice came from the back of the 100 officials. "Your Majesty, I have a memorial." Someone recognized that person. It was the commissioner of the Divine Capital, Zhang Chun. They didn't know who the previous commissioners of the Divine Capital were, but the current commissioner of the Divine Capital had caused a ruckus in the imperial court several times. It was hard not to have a deep impression of him. Some of the officials in the 3 provinces and the Ministry of Personnel knew that just yesterday, the commissioner of the Divine Capital, Zhang Chun, was also the deputy of the Imperial Ancestral Temple. Ever since the imperial examination was introduced and the Imperial Ancestral Temple supervised the imperial examination, the deputy of the Imperial Ancestral Temple had become the most popular position in the imperial court. Cui Ming's position was only behind the Commissioner of Ministers, the Secretariat's head of department, and the ministers of the 6 departments. When he saw Zhang Chun stand out, he suddenly had a bad premonition. Zhang Chun hugged his ceremonial tablet and bowed. "I want to impeach the Assistant Minister of the Secretariat, Cui Ming, and the Deputy of the Imperial Ancestral Temple." When Cui Ming heard this, his mind exploded. In the crowd, Deputy Feng was also stunned. He thought that after Prince Shou's discipline, Zhang Chun would be more obedient. He did not expect him to be so ruthless. He bypassed the Imperial Ancestral Temple and brought this matter to the imperial court. Moreover, not only did he impeach Assistant Minister Cui, but he also impeached Prince Shou. This was crazy. There were even more people in Crepe Myrtle Hall who were confused. Zhang Chun was taught by Li Mu. In the imperial court, he dared to oppose the former emperor's old system and dared to talk back to the academy's instructors. Now, why did he go against Prince Consort Cui and Prince Shou? The empress did not speak. Shangguanli looked at Zhang Chun and asked, "Lord Zhang, why are you impeaching them?" Zhang Chun said, "I impeached Cui Ming because Cui Ming was involved in a murder case that involved dozens of lives. I impeached the deputy of the Imperial Ancestral Temple because the deputy of the Imperial Ancestral Temple not only stopped me from summoning Cui Ming for interrogation, but also said that no matter what crime Cui Ming committed, the Imperial Ancestral Temple would protect him. May I ask, where is justice and justice for officials to protect each other?" In this short period of time, some officials already knew that Zhang Chun had just been promoted to the position of deputy of the Imperial Ancestral Temple. When the officials of the imperial court first took office, which one of them was not careful? When they spoke to their colleagues and superiors, they had to put on a smiling face. This Zhang Chun, on his first day in office, impeached his superior's superior in the imperial court. He did not even recognize his own family. At the front, Cui Ming's expression was calm. However, the fists in his sleeves were clenched tightly. Shangguanli turned to look at the curtain and asked, "What murder case was Assistant Minister Cui involved in?" Zhang Chun said in a low voice, "More than 20 years ago, when Cui Ming was in Yangqiu County, he was engaged to a woman. Not long after, he cruelly killed the woman in order to attach himself to a prominent family in Yangqiu County. After that, he was recommended by the prominent family to enter the academy. However, he later became acquainted with the daughter of the Jiujiang County chief. As Zhang Chun spoke, there was an uproar in the imperial court. What kind of status did Cui Ming have? He was the son-in-law of Princess Yunyang and the assistant minister of the Secretariat. How could he do such a cruel thing? He was worse than Chen Shimi in the opera. Twice in a row, for the sake of his own future, he killed his fiancée and even killed dozens of people in his wife's family. How could this be done by one person? Some of the old officials in the imperial court had heard of Cui Ming's past. The matter of the Jiujiang County chief colluding with the demon sect back then had caused an uproar in the imperial court. Even now, there were still people who remembered that Cui Ming had placed righteousness before family and was placed in an important position by the late emperor. Wait, this matter sounded a little familiar. Exposing his wife's family in exchange for his promotion. Wasn't this the same thing that Zhang Chun said happened to the prominent family in Yangqiu County? One fiancé, one wife, two wives' families, hundreds of people, were all killed because they colluded with the heretical cultivation of the demon sect. Assistant Minister Cui could be said to have met the wrong person. However, he himself was not affected. Instead, his official position was getting higher and his status was getting more and more prominent. Now, he was the assistant minister of the secretariat and the son-in-law of a country. It was too much of a coincidence to say that this was a coincidence. The imperial court was in chaos. A breath swept across the imperial court through the curtain, and the imperial court instantly quieted down. Shangguanli looked at Cui Ming and asked, "Assistant Minister Cui, what do you have to say?" Cui Ming raised his head and said righteously, "The Chu family colluded with the heretical cultivation and deserves to die. Even if this official was given another chance, this official would still choose to get rid of the traitors for the country." Assistant Minister Zhang only heard a few words of slander from a despicable person and slandered this official in the imperial court. "What are your intentions?" Cui Ming's words were either honest and upright and had a clear conscience, or he was fearless and confident in dealing with the emperor's soul-searching. Regardless of the situation, even if the emperor really did use soul-searching, he probably wouldn't be able to find anything. And His Majesty would never do that. Because of a baseless and groundless case, the emperor's son-in-law, a rank 4 official, had already crossed the bottom line of the royal court, and it would bring even greater chaos to the royal court. Cui Ming pointed to the sky and said, "I swear on the heavens and earth that if I lie, I will be struck by lightning and die a horrible death." In order to prove his innocence, he didn't hesitate to swear a Dao oath. This changed the opinion of some of the officials in the royal court. Cultivators respected the heavens and earth, and they wouldn't swear a Dao oath easily. A Dao oath wasn't just an oath, it also had a certain mysterious power, and could be considered as a kind of supernatural power. However, a Dao oath did not represent everything. Although many people would shout, "If I violate a Dao oath, I will be punished by the heavens," when making an oath, if every oath could be fulfilled, why would there be a need for the imperial court and the government to make an oath to the heavens when encountering unpredictable situations? Swearing a Dao oath couldn't completely prove Cui Ming's innocence. After a while, the Empress's voice finally came from behind the curtain. "This case will be jointly investigated by the Ministry of Justice and the Imperial Clan Temple. Assistant Minister Cui will have to cooperate with the investigation." Cui Ming said, "Yes, Your Majesty." Shangguanli stepped forward and said, "The court is dismissed." From the beginning to the end, the Empress only mentioned Cui Ming and didn't mention Prince Shou. The officials also tacitly chose to forget about it. Prince Shou was a former member of the royal family, and his identity was sensitive. As long as he didn't commit any serious crimes, it wouldn't be easy to deal with him. Cui Ming's identity was noble, and even if he was involved in a case, his freedom wasn't restricted. When he left the Ziwei Hall, he glanced at Zhang Chun and then went to the secretariat. Zhang Chun walked out of the hall, and Minister Feng chased after him. He said angrily, You, Zhang Chun, you really have the guts of a leopard. You dare to talk nonsense in the royal court without any evidence? Do you think the prince consort can make a false accusation? If the Ministry of Justice finds out that Lord Cui is innocent, your official position will be gone." Zhang Chun glanced at him indifferently and said, "You can say that after his innocence is proven." Minister Feng left angrily, and Li Mu walked up from behind. Zhang Chun looked at him and asked, "Are you sure you have a witness?" Li Mu touched the ring on his finger and said, "Don't worry, even if the Ministry of Justice and the Zongjing Temple weren't willing to punish Cui Ming, they had to follow the Empress's orders. The court was set up in the Ministry of Justice. To prevent the Zongjing Temple and the Ministry of Justice from being biased, the Empress added that the trial would be held in public. The meaning of public trial was that all the procedures would be supervised by other officials or the people. The trial process would be transparent, and any favoritism would be avoided. The person who sued Cui Ming was Zhang Chun, so he naturally couldn't be absent. The Zongjing Temple was attended by Prince Shou, and the Ministry of Justice was presided over by Assistant Minister Zhou Zhong. Other than that, there were a few officials from the Censorate and the Dali Temple. Li Mu was one of the officials from the Censorate. The people of Shendu also heard about it, and they all gathered outside the Ministry of Justice. Cui Ming was a relative of the emperor, and also an important official in the royal court. The country's scandal shouldn't be aired in public. Under normal circumstances, the Zongjing Temple's trial would be held in secret. This time, the Ministry of Justice didn't let the people in and closed the door. Since the people couldn't see what was going on inside, the discussions became even more heated. Who are they interrogating? Why are they making such a big fuss? I saw many officials entering earlier, and they didn't even let us in. I know. My relative works in the Zongjing Temple. Yesterday, Lord Zhang and the head of the Zongjing Temple quarreled. I heard that Prince Consort Cui committed a huge crime, and Lord Zhang wanted to investigate it, but the head of the Zongjing Temple refused to let him. What crime did Prince Consort Cui commit? I heard that he killed his wife and her family for his future. Tisk, that's so vicious. Isn't he more detestable than Shinshimi? I don't know if it's true or not, but the people interrogating Prince Consort Cui are the Assistant Minister of Justice and the head of the Zongjing Temple. They are in cahoots, so what can they get out of it? In the court of the Ministry of Justice, Cui Ming's case was presided over by Assistant Minister Zhou Zhong of the Ministry of Justice, and Prince Shou of the Zongjing Temple as his assistant. In terms of status, relatives of the royal family and officials of the fourth rank and above were under the jurisdiction of the Zongjing Temple. However, after Zhang Chun impeached Prince Shou in the imperial court, although the emperor did not punish him, it was still inappropriate for him to be the presiding judge. Although Cui Ming was the defendant, he could sit in the court because of his noble status. Zhang Chun, on the other hand, had to stand at the side. Standing in front of the Empress, he felt as if he was naked. Li Mu opened his mouth again and said, "Your subject will go to the Hall of Secretaries to pass on the decree." The Empress nodded and said, "Go." He took 2 steps and the Empress's voice came from behind him. "Do you need me to reward you with a few maids?" Sure enough, the Empress still remembered that matter. Li Mu said awkwardly, "There's no need." "Thank you, Your Majesty. Your subject will take his leave." Although the Empress had good intentions, even if she rewarded Li Mu with a few beautiful maids, Li Mu would not dare to accept. Not using them was one thing. If Lu Hanyan returned home and saw a group of beautiful women in his house, he would be jealous on the first day. Up until now, Li Mu had always kept the promise he made to her before he left. After leaving Shangyang Palace, Li Mu went straight to the Hall of Secretaries. The Hall of Secretaries was a confidential place and outsiders were not allowed to enter. However, the constable at the entrance did not stop him. Some time ago, he came to the Hall of Secretaries more frequently than he came home. He could almost be considered half a person of the Hall of Secretaries. Li Mu walked through the entrance of the Hall of Secretaries and asked the constable, "Is Lord Lu here?" The constable swallowed his saliva and said, "Yes, the lords are all here. I will go and call." In the Hall of Secretaries, anyone who mentioned Li Mu's name would tremble. The assistant minister of the Hall of Secretaries, the emperor's son-in-law, was a high official with a prominent status. However, he was sent to the prison of the Zongjing Temple in less than a month. The assistant minister was sent to the Zongjing Temple by him. This was not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that he first placed the Zongjing Temple on the same level as the other officials from the imperial examinations. Then, he used sufficient reasons to persuade the lords to expand the number of officials in the Zongjing Temple. Then, he took the opportunity to send his own subordinates to the Zongjing Temple. Along the way, he fought steadily and surely, advancing step by step in order to pull the assistant minister of the Hall of Secretaries down from his high horse. Before this, he did not express any intention to target Assistant Minister Cui. Even when he met him, he would take the initiative to smile and greet him. What kind of scheming was this? If he wanted to scheme against someone, it was likely that the other party would not know why they died until they were at death's door. Soon, Lu Yi hurriedly ran out from a yamen and asked, "Lord Li, is there a problem?" Li Mu said, "His Majesty asked me to pass on a verbal order. In the future, when serious murder cases occur in the various counties, after being investigated by the county yamen, they will be sent to the Ministry of Justice for approval." Chapter 277. When he walked out of the secretariat, Li Mu sighed softly. Half a month ago, Lu Yi was so warm to him, calling him brotherly. Just now, in the secretariat, Lu Yi's attitude towards him had changed dramatically. Warmth became politeness, politeness with alienation, and within the alienation with vigilance. Obviously, after the incident with Cui Ming, the straight man image he had painstakingly built had collapsed. Before today, the courtiers at most thought that he was a bootlicker of the Empress. After today, they would guard against him as a cunning fox. Although a bootlicker would bite, a dog's brain was not as scheming. Foxes were different. In the eyes of most people, foxes were cunning, sinister, and treacherous. This was actually a stereotype of this race. There were foxes who were stupid. Xiao Bai almost had the words, stupid, white and sweet, written on his face. Once everyone's impression of him changed, no matter what he did, they would probably guess whether he had a deeper motive. When he walked out of the secretariat and passed by the palace gate, a sedan chair came from outside the palace. "Out of the way, out of the way!" The few sedan bearers who were carrying the palanquin berated Li Mu from afar to move aside. Li Mu looked left and right. The palace gate could allow at least 4 palanquins to pass through at the same time. He wondered who was inside the palanquin. When he walked out of the palace gate, he happened to hear a few guards talking. "It's Princess Yunyang's sedan chair. The prince consort is in prison. The princess can't sit still anymore. The prince consort's character is so bad. The princess should just kick him away and let him fend for himself." Hearing Princess Yunyang's name, Li Mu looked back. The sedan chair had disappeared at the end of his line of sight. Judging from the direction, it should be going to the West Palace. The West Palace was occupied by the previous emperor's concubines. Although the great Zhou emperor had changed his surname after the empress ascended the throne, she did not purge the Shao royal family. She also did not make things difficult for the concubines left behind by the previous emperor. They were still allowed to live in the West Palace and were treated according to the etiquette of imperial concubines. When Mr. Mei mentioned Cui Ming and Princess Yunyang, his face was full of disdain. He looked down on the couple and thought that they were probably jackals of the same tribe. Regardless of whether it was Princess Yunyang, the Shao royal family, or the officials of the old party, they would certainly not watch Cui Ming fall from power. Princess Yunyang had entered the palace in such a hurry, she must have gone to the West Palace to plead for leniency. Li Mu left the palace and walked on the streets. The people on the streets were all talking about Cui Ming. Seeing the shopkeeper raise his hand, the woman ran away. The other 2 women glanced at her and did not chase after her. Li Mu looked at the woman running away and sighed in his heart. There was no lack of people like this woman. Fortunately, there were only a few people like her. In the hearts of most people, justice still existed. The shopkeeper of this rouge shop was a kind person. Li Mu went into the shop and bought 2 boxes of rouge. It could be considered as taking care of his business. Xiao Bai was a natural beauty. Even without makeup, she was still a peerless beauty. However, Li Mu felt that it was better for her to dress up. This way, she could reduce her charm and prevent him from having some messy dreams at night. Ever since the Empress had discovered that they slept together in the dream, she had never visited Li Mu's dream again. Li Mu had once asked Li Si this question. Of course, this was under the premise of concealing the Empress's identity. Li Si said that if a woman disregarded her identity and often went to meet a man at night, it was not because of love, but because of loneliness. Between Li Mu and the Empress, there was naturally no such thing as the former. But how could the Empress be lonely? Li Mu initially thought that Li Si was talking nonsense. However, the more he thought about it, the more he felt that what he said made sense. As the ruler of a country, the Empress was above millions of people. Because of her identity, status, and strength, the ruler of a country was often alone. They had no relatives or friends. The world only respected and feared them. In the long run, it was easy for their mentality to be suppressed to the point of perversion. Li Mu felt that the Empress was already a little inclined in this direction. In front of others, she was the noble Empress. She had to put on airs when she spoke. However, in Li Mu's dream, she was not polite at all to him. As someone who aspired to be the Empress's intimate little jacket, it was not enough to just help her solve her problems in the imperial court. He had to help her open her heart. There must be other ways besides letting her vent her feelings on him. Li Mu walked on the street, thinking about the Empress. He inadvertently glanced and saw a figure in front of him. It was a middle-aged man. He was not burly, but he was very tall and upright. His appearance was not as good as Cui Ming, but at least he was comparable to Tu Zhangchun's. Li Mu had investigated the Assistant Minister of Justice, Zhou Zhong, through Wang Wu. He did not have a wife or children. He lived in a house with 5 courtyards in the North Court. This house was bestowed by the previous emperor. Other than Zhou Zhong himself, there was only an old servant in the house. There were no other maids or servants. Li Mu did not understand why Zhou Zhong would join the old faction. His life was tight. Although the mansion he lived in was big, there were no maids or servants. Li Mu was sure that if Zhang Chun had that mansion, he would have to hire at least 8 maids, and all of them would have to be beautiful. The dragon slayer turned into an evil dragon because he coveted treasures and the princess. Zhou Zhong was not greedy for money, nor was he lustful. He did not use his power to oppress the common people. What was he after? Zhou Zhong suddenly turned around and asked, "Lord Li, you have followed me for so long. Could it be that you want to show off to me that you have captured Assistant Minister Cui?" Li Mu sneered. "Lord Zhou, don't you know why Cui Ming was captured?" Since Zhou Zhong's strength could control Madame Chu and affect her mind, he could also make Madame Chu go crazy in the court of the Ministry of Justice and use Cui Ming to get rid of her. However, he did not do so. Instead, he forced Madame Chu to break through. If Zhou Zhong did not have a grudge against Cui Ming, then there was a mole in the old faction. Zhou Zhong glanced at him and said, "The affairs of the court are not as you imagine. It is too early to talk about victory or defeat." Li Mu asked, "What do you mean?" Zhou Zhong said, "You will know by tomorrow at the latest." After saying this, he turned to leave. After taking 2 steps, he paused and turned back to say, "The Chu family's matter can be considered a wake-up call for the court. If you really want to serve the people wholeheartedly, you should propose to His Majesty to take back the right to kill the people in each county." Li Mu said, "Lord Zhou, you don't have to worry about this. I have just reported this matter to His Majesty. In the future, after the counties review the cases, the case files will be submitted to the Ministry of Justice for review. His Majesty will approve it and distribute it to the counties." Zhou Zhong nodded and said, "That is good." Li Mu thought of something. He looked at Zhou Zhong and asked, "If I remember correctly, Lord Zhou pushed for this law reform more than 10 years ago. Why was it abolished later?" Zhou Zhong said indifferently, "Because His Majesty found it troublesome." Li Mu cursed inwardly. Many of the decrees and laws of His Majesty's time were left to this day. The good great Zhou was ruined by His Majesty. Now that the world was taken over by His Majesty could only blame His Majesty. Thinking of His Majesty, Li Mu could not help but think of the Empress. He sighed and said, "Her Majesty is still the most brilliant." Zhou Zhong nodded in agreement and said, "Although loyal dogs are hard to come by, they must meet a wise ruler. Li Mu rejoiced and said, "Fortunately, I met Her Majesty." Then he realized something. He raised his head and said angrily, "Who are you calling a dog?" Chapter 278. Being a subject and being a loyal dog were two different things. Unfortunately, many people in this world didn't understand the difference between the two. Heaven, earth, ruler, family, and teacher. In people's hearts, these five were people that they had to respect and obey. This concept had been deeply rooted in people's hearts since ancient times. People had to maintain respect for heaven and earth, be loyal to their ruler, love their country, be filial to their parents, and respect their teachers. These were all virtues, but being loyal to the ruler was for the sake of love. Love didn't necessarily mean being loyal to the ruler. When faced with an incapable ruler like the previous emperor, being loyal to the ruler was no different from bringing disaster to the country. For the sake of cultivation and to realize the value of justice in his heart, Li Mu was willing to do things for the Great Zhou court and the people of Great Zhou. However, this didn't mean that he would crawl at the feet of the empress and be a loyal dog. The empress might be high and mighty in the eyes of others, but in Li Mu's heart, she couldn't be majestic. When he thought of how she had ravaged him in his dreams, the majestic image he had painstakingly built for her collapsed in an instant. Li Mu couldn't see through Zhou Zhong, but he knew that over the years, as the assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, he had shielded many people from the old party. However, he had also made incomparable contributions to perfecting the laws of Great Zhou. If one carefully read commentary on the laws of Zhou, they would discover that Zhou Zhong would amend or add a new section of the law every once in a while. In Wei Bin's case, according to the old laws, there was no doubt that his sentence would have been reduced. However, 2 years ago, Zhou Zhong had defined rape of more than 2 people as a serious case. Wei Peng's law of Great Zhou hadn't been updated in time, and by a freak combination of factors, he had successfully obtained the death penalty for Wei Bin. If one carefully studied commentary on the laws of Zhou, it was easy to discover one thing. In the past decade or so, Zhou Zhong hadn't touched on the interests of the nobles in Shen-du. Ever since the failure of the reform, he had never tried to abolish the penal code. Instead, he had used a silent method to promote the reform of the laws at the lower levels. If he hadn't revised the laws 2 years ago, Li Mu would have been able to see Wei Bin and the others in Shen-du a few years later. Human nature was complicated. It was hard to label someone like Zhou Zhong as a good or bad person. However, there was no doubt that he was a smart person. He would not have said those words to Li Mu for no reason. Regarding Cui Ming, it was still too early to talk about winning or losing. Li Mu pondered for a long time. The empress could actually put down her status and call a little fox sister. She really did not behave like an empress at all. However, he soon realized that Li Si was probably right. She was powerful and had a high status, but she was also human. Humans would feel lonely. After becoming the empress, she had no relatives, no friends, and even no enemies. For the sake of the throne, the Shao royal family had fought with the new party to the bitter end. However, what they were fighting for was the position of the next emperor. As the youngest transcendent expert in the Great Zhou dynasty, the Shao royal family would not dare to become her enemy. Li Mu sighed. As a person, she did not even have an enemy. No wonder she would feel lonely. Xiaobai was silly because of this. When others knew the empress's status, they would respect her and stay away from her. Xiaobai was close to anyone who treated her well. This was the nature of the Heavenly Fox clan. As for Xiaobai, because she was so beautiful that even women could not arouse the slightest jealousy, it was easy for her to capture the empress's heart. Last time, the empress gave her a few drops of Heavenly Fox blood essence, allowing her to advance to 4 tails. She remembered this kindness in her heart and probably forgot the task Lu Hanyan gave her. She automatically excluded the empress from the ranks of fox spirits. While these thoughts flashed through Li Mu's mind, the empress had already walked out of the garden. She stood outside the garden and gently waved her sleeves. Li Mu instantly felt that the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the courtyard suddenly became abundant. In the garden, the seeds that Xiaobai had just planted sprouted and broke out of the ground. They grew rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. First, green leaves were born, and then buds were formed. In a short moment, the buds that had just formed buds were competing to bloom. In a few breaths of time, the garden in the Li residence was full of flowers. Li Mu marveled at the transcendent powerhouse's Daoist magic. Xiaobai was already dumbfounded. She grabbed the Empress's sleeve and said blankly, "Sister Zhou, I want to learn this." The Empress pinched her face and said, "When you grow another tail, I will teach you." Li Mu didn't tell Xiaobai that if she wanted to reach the Empress's level, she would have to grow another 3 tails and become a 7-tailed fox. Spring was a magical power that could be performed by a powerhouse in the creation realm. However, the cultivation of the 5th realm was only at the level of making the withered tree sprout. The Empress's Daoist magic that could make the withered tree bloom in a short period of time required at least the cultivation of the 7th realm. In the small courtyard, the fragrance of flowers filled the air. Xiaobai ran into the garden, sniffing and looking around. The woman in the palace dress asked, "Is His Majesty in the palace? I have something to see His Majesty." Shangguanli looked at the woman in the palace dress, shook her head and said, "Imperial Dowager, His Majesty is not in the palace." You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.